All right.
Cue video.
Most on-time meeting start ever. Welcome to the Mercer Island City Council meeting of August 6, 2012. The meeting will come to order. Al, could you call roll?
Councilmember Debbie Bertlin. Here. Councilmember Jane Brom. Here. Councilmember Mike Sarrow.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Grady. Councilmember Councilmember Tonneson. Deputy Mayor Dan Grouse.
Here.
Mayor Bruce Bassett.
Here. Thank you. And we've just completed a study session regarding results of our biennial survey, and now we're moving into regular business for the evening. First item of business will be the public appearances. So, as always, we have a handful of rules around that. Limit your comments, please, to 3 minutes. Give us your name and address. Some information you need, Ira, but for anybody else who wishes to speak.
Okay. Ira Appleman, 6213 83rd Place Southeast.
Off you go.
I object to the council's lack of transparency on a couple of issues. The first is on the bond issue. There's been no public hearing. I think this is unprecedented that there's been no public hearing before the levy issue. There's been no public hearing in advance of the council voting for a levy, and I don't think that's ever happened before. We always have a formal hearing in which public input is received, and we haven't had that. The other is that all of the substantive decisions on the levy were made at the retreat. It's a hard council rule that no decisions are made at the retreat, and they were all made at the retreat and off camera so that the public couldn't see those decisions. And when Councilmember Sewell brought up last time the issue of the size of the fire station, Councilmember Sen told him that had already been made, that decision had already been made at the retreat, and so that's a substantive issue that should have been discussed in the public, which it wasn't. I think there is a reason. We heard on the survey that public confidence in the City Council's spending of money has declined, and I think there's a reason for that. The second transparency issue has to do with the illegal executive session that was held by the city last time concerning a politically sensitive issue of whether part of Mercerdale Park should be sold off. And how you announced it is illegal. You said on the agenda to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price. None of that happened. Now the excuse is that you were going to discuss the minimum price which you would sell, which is not what you said in advance of that meeting. That meeting was illegal, and there was no way that you were talking about the minimum price. So what you were talking about is what should have been talked about in public, whether you should get rid of part of Mercerdale Park or not, a very, very sensitive issue. And that's what you were really talking about, and you tried to disguise it in terms of a minimum price. But you had no basis for discussing a minimum price. You had no appraisals, and you had no public input as to the importance of the property. So it's obviously false that you were talking about a minimum price and that it was somehow an exception to the open public rule, which is different from the one that you claimed that you were doing. And that wasn't an innocent mistake, because if you'd said that you were going to consider a minimum price, then people would start asking, what land is the city considering selling? But you disguised that, and then it doesn't make any sense, because it clearly had nothing to do with minimum price. It had to do whether you were going to consider a very sensitive issue of getting rid of Mercerdale Park. Thank you.
Thanks, Ira. Anyone else? All right. With that, we close. One more. Oh, Callie.
It's a little slow.
Welcome.
My name is Callie Rodolfi, and I live at 3432 72nd Avenue Southeast, and I'm here on behalf of the nonprofit Island Vision. And I wanted to acknowledge the efforts of the city, in particular Mayor Bruce Bassett and J. Mayor Brom, as well as the councilperson Tana Sin, and the work of the Sustainability Policy Task Force that was underwent this year. And I understand that a group of citizens, as well as staff and the council members, went through a number of committee meetings as well as subcommittee meetings and identified numerous action items that relate to waste reduction, energy and water conservation, sustainability in our yards, and also green building. And we understand that in lean budget times, we can all move forward using innovative ideas and perhaps being open to new ideas. And Island Vision has a mission of encouraging sustainable practices on the island. And we want to support the city, the schools, and also our community in adopting more sustainable practices. We partnered with the city in the past few years with initiating the farmers market and also the annual Leap for Green Fair. And by the way, the Mercer Island Farmers Market will be celebrating its 5th birthday, is that right, on Sunday. So we hope you can all join us. And we look forward to supporting the city and encouraging and moving on the recommendations of that task force in ways that make sense for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. Okay, anyone else? All right, with that, we close public comments. Moving on to minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes this evening. So first, the revised mini planning session minutes of June 18, 2012.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the meeting minutes from June 18th, 2012.
Second.
These have already been revised once, right? So,
Mr. Mayor and City Clerk, I think on the agenda it's saying June 18th. It was June 16th. Is that correct? All right.
thank you. Okay.
Make that June 16th, 2012.
Thank you. Okay. Assuming any comment changes? No, they've already been revised. All right. So all in favor of adopting those minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, those minutes are adopted. Second set, we have special joint meeting with MISD School, Mercer Island School District Board, June 26, 2012.
Move to approve the June 26th, 2012 meeting minutes.
Second.
Corrections? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those are adopted.
I'd like to abstain there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And I think, yeah.
Were you abstaining as well? Okay, so 2 abstentions, Ally. And finally, the regular meeting minutes of July 16, 2012, if I've got dates right now.
Move to approve the regular meeting minutes of July 16th, 2012.
Second.
Any corrections, comments on those? I have one. So over on page 4, 3rd paragraph, 3rd word, the council decided to form a committee to consider opportunities. I think the council reaffirmed its prior decision to form a committee to consider opportunities. Because we had previously decided that. So, okay with that correction?
I'd just like to make a comment. I think the minutes on the AD 4748 fire station was very well documented, and I especially appreciated, which I'd like to see as future practice, where it is documented what council members gave the thumbs up, thumbs down. So very much like those minutes on that particular agenda.
Okay, noted. All right, if nothing else, Ally, do we need a...
Yeah, you need to make a motion and have a second to that motion to change the minutes.
To change it, okay. I can't make the motion, right?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of that change, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that change passes. So now back to the minutes. All in favor of the minutes as amended, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, done with minutes. On to consent calendar. Payables, payroll, and Agenda Bill 4753, interlocal agreement with MISD for counseling services.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take the APs off and also AB 4753 off.
Okay, we have payroll. All in favor of payroll being adopted, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, payroll is adopted. Come to payables then, Mike.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On PF page 29, that's set 1, page 9, the chamber for $1,200 services. Curious what that is.
What we need to do here is, Ally, would you call the finance director and have him come in, because he was prepared for these questions, and I was waiting for Chip. So, well, it probably is the monthly rent. It's not rent. It's the city's contribution to the chamber, which happens to equal what their annual rent is.
Well, that's actually the question I had. Is that the budgeted amount that we have to the chamber?
I believe so.
And not an additional, okay. G,
We'll verify that.
okay, on PDF 41, set 2, page 7, advertising for the DSG director, and I have by Director Siegel, the explanation on there, but I have a question on her explanation. Veterans receive 10% veterans preference points through our civil service recruitment. Is that only for police and fire?
That's correct.
Why not the others?
It's for civil service recruitment, and that's by civil service rule. We don't do that for any other recruitment.
So our maintenance folks and the folks in this room are not civil service?
No.
Learn something every day.
Mike, your first question, did you feel like that was adequately addressed? Or
Chip, if it's correct.
Chamber payment, $1,400, that's the monthly, $1,200, is that's just our monthly amount?
Yep.
Okay.
Great, thank you. And this goes to the chief on PDF 43 to page, let's see, set 2, page 9. All black helmets?
Those are rescue helmets, and we had to upgrade an existing inventory due to changes in regulation.
The rescue helmets that they normally wear?
Yes.
I would think that they'd take pride in a scarred helmet that's gone the distance.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the physical appearance. It has to do with what the regulations require, what standards the helmets have to meet.
So the Army's had 2 helmet designs in the last 70 years. The design, there's that much innovation in helmet design?
I don't know that I could answer that question. I mean, changes do occur. I don't know what cycle they do.
Okay, all right. And then thank you, Chief. On PDF 65, set 3, page 13, on the Earth Corps volunteer recruitment, this $8,100, is that a one-time charge for the annual service or that they do for us? Or has that been a reoccurring? Is that a reoccurring $8,000 or that? Or maybe I should ask it this way: is that the charge for that particular month?
I do not know. I know Earth Corps does work for us regularly, and so I don't think that amount is a fixed amount. But they do usually it's out of every year.
CIP projects for invasive species removal run out of the Parks Department. I'm sure it's on some contract that we have signed with them, but I don't know if that's a periodic payment or they just finished a project and we paid them the full amount for the project.
I believe it's the latter. I believe it is wrapping up of a project, periodic payment.
Okay. The only thing that seems like a lot of money for managing, and that's 800 at minimum wage hours, a lot of hours in that $8,000. But I'll just keep an eye on that, I suppose. And that's all I have for that, Mr. Mayor. Do you have a?
I just have a question. I have a process question. I'd like to consider myself still new enough to ask a process question. each city council meeting, we get these in advance, and I every week ask the staff the questions in advance, and I'm just wondering, is that the right format to do it in advance, or is it
That is very
to
helpful.
have the public airing of the questions? And I'm just curious as to the process.
It's very helpful for us to have some advance notice, because we pay thousands of bills, and when a council member has a question about one, I have to go to Chip, and then Chip sometimes has to go out and ask somebody out in the departments, what was that? Often he knows off the top of his head. So a little bit of advance notice is handy so you don't catch us unaware here. If you still would like to ask the question so somebody else hears the answer, then do it here. If you are satisfied with the answer with a phone call or an email, that's fine too. It's really your call. Frankly, the style of the council over the last couple of years has been to dive into the claims way more than I've seen in the 25 years I've been coming to council meetings. You guys really do like to read the claims, so and we're going to have an answer for you. If you ask it, we'll answer it.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we accept the APs, accounts payable.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Mike, back to you for Agenda Bill 4753.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question, a change on that, interlocal with MI counselors. There's the addition of $1,000 for supplies, which is foreign to me that's there, and it's quite unexpected, actually.
Cindy, step on up if you...
Mike, just to round out your question, I think Mike's also referring to Section 5 of the agreement, which says that the supplies are to be provided by the district at no cost to the city.
Yeah.
So just, if you can answer the question in that context.
Thank you. Cindy Goodwin, Department Director for Youth and Family Services. When, for the operating supplies listed with the expenses, we often use those supplies for the events and activities with the youth themselves, so any kind of natural helpers, the snowboarding program that runs for 8 weeks, any kind of enhancements that we do with the kids themselves. And that's separate from what the school provides us, and they're very generous with giving us copies of anything we need while we're operating and being a counselor. But we've always separated those out. So each year there's a figure in there specifically for our work with the kids, and that's the distinction.
Well, there's not. What do you mean each year there's what?
So each year of the interlocal, there's usually been, are you referring to another one where it wasn't?
Last year it didn't have $1,000.
That may have been an oversight. I think it's been in there most years that I'm aware of, so I can go back and look at that. Because it's been in there this many years, so I'm not sure why. And I can go take a look at that, but that's how we've separated it. So I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. I'll make a motion here, Mr. Mayor. Okay. Authorize the city manager. Let me see. Authorize the city manager to sign the interlocal agreement for the Mercer Island School District Counseling Services during the 2012-13 school year, less the operating supplies for $1,000.
Is there a second? Okay, motion fails for lack of a second. Cindy, thank you. Don't go far. You may have questions still,
Okay.
but you're off the hook at the moment. Anybody else care to venture a motion?
Well, I have another question. Can I still ask another question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it was wrong on my list, and this is probably the most important one. I have a question on the salaries. So when I look at the 2011-2012 average salary for this program, the salary averaged out to $60,000 per FTE. On this one, 2012 to 2013 salary, the average is $71,000, a 20% increase per FTE. How does that happen?
I've asked Chip to help me with this question, and I did some of our calculations too, so it's not with this, Chip.
I don't have the exact answer off the tip of my head, but what I do know is salaries have not gone up 20%. There's been no market adjustment for those folks for the counselors. They've just gotten COLA or pay for performance related, and that doesn't amount to 20%. What I'm trying to remember, Mike, is was there an error in the last interlocal agreement, and this maybe reflects a correction to a salary error. I think I can't quite pull that memory back to the tip of my brain here, or tip of my tongue, but I seem to recall there's some kind of correction to the past interlocal agreement. But I assure you there is not a 20% increase in salaries going on. There is a significant increase in benefits, and medical has gone up significantly. The public employee retirement system rates have gone up significantly over the last year and going up significantly next year as well. L&I rates have gone up, and so I know that's happening, but salary itself is not a 20% increase. And that should be a blend of both.
So, Chip, if I recall, the district 60,000 has stayed pretty fixed for quite a while.
What's it been, 3 years, I think?
So the city share keeps going up relative to the district?
We bear the brunt of the increase.
Yeah.
It used to be, as you recall, they used to bear quite a bit more than that.
Right, I know that.
And the change came at the same year that we did the the park bond and levy.
Right.
It was in that year when we made some adjustments related to, in the levy, the maintenance of school recreational facilities.
So just to take off on what Mike was saying, if you look at the compensation levels, you got 3 elementary school counselors, and I assume these numbers include benefits, so they average $51,000. You got a middle school counselor who gets $75,000 salary and benefits. You've got a high school drug and alcohol counselor at $68,000, and an R&R place counselor who goes up to $76,000. It's the highest paid in the group. Oh, I'm sorry, the 60 goes into it, so actually the elementary schools are at 60-something also.
That's a salary and benefit number combined.
You know, I think Mike raises a fair question. If the numbers are up 20%, we can't explain why they're up 20%. I think that probably it's appropriate for more information to come back to the council when you've got that information available. I don't think we can just blanket and approve a 20% increase without understanding that it's not a 20% increase.
Is there a time frame on which this needs to be signed to not significantly disrupt the world?
Mr. Mayor, what I'd suggest, I'll bet if you put this at the end of your agenda, that question probably can be asked and answered by staff in the next hour or two.
I'm not seeing a nod from staff.
I will squeeze in. I would have had the answer normally because I had the heads up regarding. I just was too busy to get to that particular bit, but I will squeeze it in.
You're comfortable trying to address it later in the evening? Okay. And nothing you'd like to do but stay until the end of the evening, I'm sure.
Here anyways.
Okay. If the rest of council's okay with that, we'll proceed on that basis. Remind me, please, to come back to it. All right. With that, then we move on to regular business. Agenda item 5, Agenda Bill 4759, Mercerdale Park / Hillside School Development. Where are we starting with this one? Is it on me?
Well, as the first line of the agenda bill says, it came at the request of and direction of the mayor and deputy mayor. So I'd be happy to help in whatever way I can, but this is really your guys.
Okay. I can make a motion. If you'd like to start that way.
Yeah.
Why don't we, can we go back through the history of this a little bit? Just,
Yeah, that's probably a good spot to start.
yeah.
And
Mayor Bassett?
yeah.
May I get in on this here? Yeah, as long as I'm here. Until Mr. Appleman spoke earlier this evening, he made me aware of something, learn something new every day. In my memo to you, I cite the RCW regarding the sale property. What I missed at the hearing, let me take responsibility for this. If there's an error here, it's not the council's or the staff's, it's mine. I missed the fact that the statute that was cited is the purchase statute. As you know, it was about 11:30 at night, and by the time we got to it, it was 12, but that error is mine, that it was subsection B that was cited, not subsection C. You did discuss some Bs, but we missed the C. That portion of it I need to take responsibility for.
And thank you for that, Scott. I'm sure that I bear some of that responsibility too, because I'm the one who said it. So, Ira, to your point, you're correct on that one, and my mistake.
We'll note that the remedy is for a violation of that sort is to undo anything that was done, and as the council knows, you did nothing. So,
but I think the point that was raised by Ira and by others is one that the council needs to pay attention to, and whether or not we were legally correct in what we did, and I fully believe we were legally correct in what we did. It's an appearance issue, and there was no intent to withhold information or discussion from the public. So when Mike Cyril raised the issue with Bruce and Rich and myself a couple of weeks ago, realizing that we had created an appearance issue when there was no intention to hide anything, the decision was made to put this on the agenda and give the council a chance to discuss this in open session, and give any member of the public who wanted to talk about it a chance to comment before the council. So so that's why it's back here now in this form, and it's here strictly to tee up the question as to whether there would be any interest in the council of discussing with the school district a possible sale of some part of Mercerdale.
And let me try and sort of take off on, and thank you for setting that up, Dan. I have thought a lot about what Mike's comments in his memo, and how we should have proceeded on this, or could have proceeded on this. The question was brought to us by the school district, who said, we're interested in the Mercerdale site. We'd like you to consider making that available to the district. And so the question came to us is, what do we wish to respond with? The question teed up through the ad hoc committee, which is only a subset of the council. So the question becomes, what is the full council's position on this? And Rich will help me out here if I run astray, but as I understand it, we are a body that has a fiduciary responsibility to this municipality, to the city, and as such, it's essential for us to always be thinking in terms of what the financial and other circumstances of the city are, and try and do the best for the city. And this question got murky, I think, because it was a school district we were dealing with. And Rich made the point, well, what if it were a private entity that we're proposing to purchase Mercerdale and do something with it? What if, for instance, Kemper Friedman and said, gee, I'd like to put a mall on Mercerdale Park. Would you consider selling it? And I think that in that case, we would have seen that as a very arm's-length possible transaction and said, clearly that's something we want to discuss in executive session. It's not a topic for an open public conversation, because there's a great deal of financial responsibility we have here around what the city could achieve or lose in this deal. So it becomes clear there. Even if it were a public arrangement that were being considered, say, for instance, the port had said, we're thinking of putting a convention center on the site. we'd be dealing with another public entity, but in the same way, it would be an arm's length transaction where we would have no interest in revealing our cards as to where we were going with that. Again, it's the school district, because we're the same set of voters, the same community, that it suddenly becomes murkier, and we think, well, maybe we have to discuss that in open session. But I believe that it actually was our responsibility to discuss this in executive session and come to a reasoned conclusion about where we stood on it. Now, with that said, I think we now have come to a point where the decision was reached, the decision was delivered to the ad hoc committee just 3 days after the decision was reached, and Mike raises a good point. So how do we have as much public airing of this as possible? And when that was presented to us, Dan and I agreed, makes sense. Let's have a public discussion around that and make public as aware as we can of what the council's thinking on this is. So that's how I got to where I am. I saw that hand first, and I'll go to that hand second. So, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we get into the Mercer-Dell discussion, I would like to thank the mayor and the deputy mayor for doing this, putting this on the agenda. We will make mistakes of getting into the murky area more than we should. I think we do it. We did the other day in the executive session, and I think the citizens out there should be confident in the leadership that you two are showing in saying, yep, we went too far, it needs to be out in the open, and that's what we're doing it out in the open. So for that, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Deputy Mayor, I appreciate it, and I commend you on that decision.
Mike.
Having read through the administrative record, the question that still hasn't been asked, though, is holding a public hearing as opposed to just a public airing of the discussion. And I do agree that it's good to have the public hearing, but I think in particular when we get to issues where we're talking about potential sale of public property, particularly park property, which is not only conserving the environment, but conserving key recreational resources for a population, I think we need to go the extra step in backing away and saying, you know what, it's not good enough for us to make the decision. We need to really hear from the public about how they feel about a potential sale or transfer of park property. And we're particularly sensitive about that on the south end, by the way.
Just on that point, too, our city attorney, Scott, actually made that very point, that had the council chose to take any step beyond the sort of on-off switch, we would be required to go through an extensive public process for our comprehensive plan and otherwise. So we would have gone on that track had the council picked a different course and seriously put this out on the public stage.
If I could follow up, you in effect already have a policy in your comprehensive plan. The park is listed as an asset. In order to divest yourself of it, you'd not only have to have public hearings, but you'd have to initiate a fairly extensive public process as a part of your comp plan amendment. So if the council wants to move forward, you can consider this as a preliminary discussion. You certainly can't make the decision tonight. You couldn't have made it in executive session. It's a process with many moving parts. Debbie?
I think we all have acknowledged that there's many issues here that do need to be aired publicly. One of the areas that I've been thinking about and considering a significant amount is how do we handle this and how do we take it forward? Because it's not only an issue now of Mercer-Dale, it's an issue of various potential additional sites that the school district may or may not choose to consider for a potential sixth school. And in the course of our discussion tonight, I hope we can all air our respective thoughts about Mercer-Dale specifically, but also come to some general consensus as to how we're going to move forward, because it won't stop and start with Mercer-Dale alone. And I'd also like to encourage us to consider when do we debate and discuss particular properties at the request of a subset of the school district as opposed to a committed request from the majority of the school district, because I feel we can have endless amounts of discussion and engender a huge amount of public involvement, but until we know what the school district would like us to debate and discuss, I think that it's perhaps not as crisp and forward directional as we would want it to be. So I'd like to get that clarified too.
So where I'm planning to go, really two-step process here. One is essentially a review of the question in brief, and then an opportunity for each of us to air our views that led to the vote that was taken in the executive session. The outcome of the executive session. Not sure how to phrase that.
Mr. Mayor, could I help?
Yeah, please do.
Because again, decisions usually did
wading into trouble here for myself.
Well, and pardon me, because it's the executive session privilege. Confidential information continues. But as I was advising you, my understanding of the process was the council was polled to determine whether you wanted to set a price. And when we reached a majority of the council who didn't, there was no point in going forward in the conversation. Because obviously it wasn't going anywhere at that point. You weren't going to set a price. So no vote was taken, but there was certainly, we got to that threshold, as council members were aware, that there wasn't a majority that wanted to go forward, and that ended the discussion.
Thank you. Keep bailing me out here. So with that, I would suggest we just go down the dais and express our opinions, or if you want to wave a hand and say you want to go in some other order, feel free. But unless somebody else has a different approach to this, I'm figuring we're just going to jump in.
All right, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I have always been and will continue to be opposed to the sale or transfer of city park property, especially in Mercerdale.
Thank you.
We're going down one?
Yep.
Okay, good. So first of all, I too do oppose the sale of Mercerdale for multiple reasons, and in particular, when we're evaluating the conditions and concerns that the school district has, there was nothing that was uniquely identified about Mercerdale that would make it a one and only. The criteria that was noted and discussed allowed for consideration of multiple sites, and I think, therefore, Mercerdale as a parkland, as a limited resource that we have on the island should not be first and foremost or the sole source of discussion. The other piece that I would call out is that the cost associated with Mercerdale would be substantial. And when we go and look at what the survey results were from the community, the cost of the bond was one of the, I think, primary points of worry or debate. So it's not just a matter of us selling a piece of property, which of course has a cost to the school district. I think we'll also be looking at what some of the environmental conditions are that would require, I believe, extensive work on the hillside, expensive construction costs, etc. So considering it as a unique recreational area, both Mercerdale and the hillside, the cost associated and the fact that there were no conditions that were unique to that site that could not be addressed elsewhere, I did not support Mercerdale being sold.
Thank you.
Given the survey that the school board did that showed a number of people preferred not to use Mercerdale and directed the city or suggested to the school board that there were other properties that they already owned that they could use, I thought that was, and their dissatisfaction with the overall price of the school bond. When I was looking at this, I was thinking, again, as kind of Debbie said, adding to the cost of a school a large amount of money to buy property, since they would have to pay us for fair market value for that property, it kind of, that combined with the fact that the school board didn't say that this is where they want to do a school, I wasn't even sure why we were discussing it, because it seemed like, it's the school board's decision where if they want to do a sixth school, and then they can discuss and consider where they want to put that school. It seemed like it was premature. And so I wasn't comfortable even talking about that. But they had to come to us at that point after that discussion, and they said that was a priority, the direction they wanted to head in. If you look back at the school board, I think the school board's history, I think there are many in the community who, looking back in retrospect, that when they sold off property that they owned, some see that as a mistake. At the time, I think they were doing it based on the information they had, and so I don't challenge that. but being on the council now and looking at what the city has as finite resources, if we sell off our finite resources of land, albeit to a school, but we can't get that back. And so until we have a really good reason and a lot of other factors, I wouldn't be comfortable selling off city land, environmental land, park land that the city owns.
Mr. Mayor, I can go next before we get a majority against me. Go ahead, Mike. Well, I mean, it certainly isn't a pleasant thought selling land, or I will entertain, we're not going to sell the land, we would transfer the land. So it would be, from a cost perspective, I'd suggest that we transfer the land to the school at no cost. I mean, it's silly that we would think about taxing our same citizens just so that we can get the money in the city. That doesn't make any sense that we would sell it. It would be a transfer of property. We are an island. We are an island with limited space. You all know that. The school district is in a bind. The community is in a bind for what seems to me an overwhelming consensus that we need a sixth school. I won't say an elementary school. There's talk that it's 5, 6, etc. So I'll just say a sixth school. What I am suggesting is that we just don't close the door on the school district. We just don't close the door on the community that, no, we will not consider a hillside, or as Councilmember Bertland suggested, other areas, unequivocally, will give the school district the opportunity to evaluate all the pros and cons, all the construction requirements, et cetera, and give them the opportunity to consider many aspects of what we, the city, has to use for a sixth school. And as far as being at Mercerdale, if they could make that work, it certainly would be difficult to build on a hillside. But if they could make that work, the community has a lot to, just first glimpse, has a lot to gain from a school in that location. It's on the north end, which has difficult to quantify, but certainly positive traffic implications to Island Crest Way. It has difficult to quantify, but certainly positive traffic implications to the traffic around the mega block, around the mega block, and Island Crest Way and 40th. And there's the negative side of that, which if the school uses the mega block for their sixth school, that's going to have pretty significant traffic issues, because we know from the school districts asking that we do a study of the traffic patterns there, that they already have a traffic issue, a traffic concern with the mega block. So there are many positive issues which will save the whole community money. There's also a sustainability issue aspect of that, and this has been brought up to me several times. At that particular location, there are I think there are 4 neighborhoods that would feed into that school that are within walking distance. The Central Business District, possibly First Hill, the area just south, and the neighborhood just south of Mercerdale, and also the area across, 70th, kind of to the east, south and east of Mercerdale. So, a sustainability perspective would get people out of their cars, and they'd be walking to schools, and that again is another positive for our traffic issues that we on the council have to address, and usually that means spending a lot of money. So it's not that I'm saying, use the Mercerdale hillside. I think what the council should be open and accommodating and giving the school district maximum flexibility in placing this sixth school that they have vision. And for that reason, I would like to go forward in telling them they have that opportunity to use that property, Mercerdale.
Thank you. Jane, you want to take a shot?
Sure. I was frankly very surprised to see this come forward. I am definitely opposed to the idea of whether it's a transfer or a sale, a school on Mercerdale. The irony is the school district used to own Mercerdale. That's irrelevant now, I realize. But I think it is a site that has way too many problems. If you look at the steep slope, potential slide, erosion, seismic, contour, and watercourse problems, I think it's a big mistake. I think I could see it would have to be a school on stilts. I could see buses, cars, lots of traffic. I could see the flat part of Mercerdale turning into a school playground. I mean, I just see a lot of problems with it. I think the school district needs a home run. They need a big success, and this would be a disaster, in my opinion. I remember what a lot of citizens will remember is a ballot measure in 1987 to put City Hall on Mercerdale Park. There were some plans, there was a competition, a design competition, and it was a very bitter battle, and that went down. 10 years later, in 1997, when we needed a new fire station, the one on 78th was too old, too small, and it appeared that the site was very minimal in size. There was a proposal to build a new fire station there. That went down. We tore down the old fire station and built our current fire station. I think the idea of putting a school on Mercerdale is a bad one.
Thank you. Jane, you want to?
First, I actually agree with one statement that Mike made, and that is that if there is something the city could do to facilitate a site for another school, if that's in fact what the school board decides is in the best interest of the community, then we should do what we can to help the school district. I don't accept the notion that all city property is off limits. So I think that if we could find a place that would assist in that, then we should do so. Mercerdale, though, is not that site. You look at around Mercerdale, and I walked down there with one member of the school board and walked all around, and there's obviously some city property that potentially could be repurposed, like the area where the thrift shop is now, and another home could be found for the thrift shop, because it's a flat area that doesn't impact the park. One could even argue that if you came around and moved the skateboard park, you could also, if you took the thrift shop area and the skateboard park and maybe even circle back around towards the recycling center, there'd be something you could do, but just even when you add all that up, there's just not enough land. So it forces you to go into the hillside, and as soon as you go into the hillside, that gets to be, I think, a disaster, both from a ecological, environmental standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint. Building into a hillside would just so increase the cost of construction to make it prohibitive. I think we've all found that from other construction projects, which we've been party to, either privately or in public, in our public service. So my feeling is that under these circumstances, I was definitely not prepared to give up the heart of Mercerdale. That's critical to our town center. It's critical to our community. It's the one gathering area we have for our community that is used repeatedly, and I think we can all agree that if one thing this community needs is gathering areas, places where the community can come together. Last thing I want to see us do is give that up. But so I'm hoping that as we progress the discussions with the school district, that there might be other opportunities somewhere else where the city could partner with the school district. It's just my opinion that this is not one of them.
Thanks, Dan. I think the way I look at this is that we love our schools, we all do, but we love our parks too. And this became a trade-off where we were saying schools are so important that we would give up what is really a gem of a park in our community. And to me, that is not someplace that I think the voters are willing to go. I don't see this really as my decision so much as I'm trying to channel what the public would think about this. And I think we have a great example in this historic way that Mercer Dale, when teed up for other things, has become the third rail. It's become something that people absolutely did not want to lose. So to suggest going there now, to me, says we haven't learned from history. We'd end up finding ourselves back in the school district would end up finding itself back in a huge fight with no forces opposed to a bond measure that took them in this direction, and would find themselves with a large mess. So I love, Mike points it out, folks on the school board have pointed it out, I love the sustainability aspects of this, the fact that it could be walking distance from kids in town center, and there's some great things that could happen around that, and I don't want to give that short shrift at all. I like those thoughts, but on balance, as I think about the overall situation, and as I consider the results of the survey, the citizen survey said, this was well down the list compared to using the mega block or compared to using the site adjacent to here. So to me, that all compounded my sense that this is not a good idea, and I opposed it. So each of us have had a chance. I do want to move on to, and I guess
I'll make a motion. Mr. Mayor, I have a motion to make. I'd like to move that we communicate to the Mercer Island School Board through the Council Board Ad Hoc Committee that Mercer Dale Park and Hillside is available for transfer for public school purposes. Is there a second? Okay, that fails for lack of a second. And actually, at risk of spinning off in a direction we ought not spin off, but because it ties back to this question or this point I'm raising about fiduciary responsibility, could one of our attorneys help us out? Is it legally possible for us to transfer a piece of property without compensation to another entity?
Katie, I'd be glad to push the mic your way. The general rule is that any transfer of property, the state auditor is going to look for fair and valuable consideration. Interlocal transfers between public entities get a lot more slack. There are other sorts of consideration that the city could take, but they'd be looking for some quid pro quo, something significantly of value. Wouldn't have to be with the precision that you'd be judged by the state auditor with the sale to a private entity because of constitutional restrictions, but you'd still need to show valuable consideration.
Thank you. You agree? Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. All right, we have consensus amongst our attorneys. All right, I'm hoping there'll be another motion.
I'll move to communicate to this Mercer Island School Board through the Council Board Ad Hoc Committee. The Mercer Dale Park and Hillside is not available for sale or use for public school purposes.
Second.
Further discussion? I think we've probably all had our say. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. I want to move on to part two of what Dan and I agreed would be another point of conversation this evening. Mike, you raised the question of whether it belonged here. I'm not sure where I would have put it either, but here's where it landed because staff put it here. So I'm going to tee this one up because this was my little pet peeve, and that is, so Mike, the letter you sent to us is on letterhead that says at the top, City Council, City of Mercer Island, Washington. And It's my opinion that when one council member is expressing that council member's opinion to the rest of the council or to anybody, that it would be improper to use letterhead that suggests that that's of the city council. Back in August of last year, you used the same approach with what became known as the Mike and Mike memo. At that time, I suggested I thought that was an inappropriate use of letterhead, and it's an approach you've taken again this time. And what I would propose this time is, and have asked Rich to draft, is some language around a new council rule that would just clarify this. I had not looked at the language that was proposed before it appeared in our agenda bill. It ends up looking a little bit like I'm trying to grab control of things, and I'll let Rich say that that's not my intent. But go ahead and say it's not my intent.
It was exactly his intent. No, of course not. The thrust of the interest that came as the mayor and deputy mayor discussed it with me was to set a rule that was clear for all council members to use now and in the future, that how we communicate, or how the council communicates as a body, and to put that in some sort of very clear language. So the notion here is that city letterhead is to be used, or is one vehicle to use, to communicate messages of the body, and to make sure that that's clear, that it is of the body, that letterhead only be used by the mayor or the mayor's designee. In other words, the mayor, and this isn't Bruce, this is the mayor for the next year and a half and for presumably the next decades and decades, that the mayor be sort of the keeper of the council's official letterhead. City uses letterhead all the time to communicate for administrative purposes, so really this comes down to what is the agreement that you have amongst yourselves about when a letter on behalf of the council goes out. And this seems to be a fairly unambiguous way to handle it.
So I've teed that up, and am looking for input or a motion or whatever.
Comment. First, it seems very awkward that it's in this agenda bill. So, but I understand we're trying to piggyback on it and get it through. And I do agree with the approach that an individual council member doesn't represent the views of the council unless they state what the majority opinion is. But maybe there's another option because other councils that I work with have letterhead for individual council members. So maybe that would be an approach that you can add on to this, stating the majority issues and the mayor as the gatekeeper, etc. And if there are individual issues, then the council member then uses that specific council member letterhead. So that there is some official way that Mike or any other council member can convey official interest in an issue, short of just using blank letterhead. This suggestion.
Mike, you
You're right. So it's inappropriate that we talk about this piggybacking off of a completely unrelated item, one. Two, I think it's a valid study session about council member behavior, or conduct, if you want to, and something that I've asked that we include in a study session on when the council as a body needs to rise to the occasion if a council member is not conducting himself appropriately, be that for attendance, residency, what have you. And this would be a great time to do it with this council, since I think this council, all the individual members are clean, if you will. That's a beside point. I just want to, you, Mr. Mayor and Deputy Mayor, can follow that as a study session. Hopefully you recall when I did ask that that is included on our study sessions. The third point, you don't talk about controlling or the communication of a council member. I'm not going to take it as far as Barbara Voxer, that I worked hard for this position and I want letterhead type stuff, but I've used letterhead twice since I've been on here, one with the Mike and Mike letter and this letter. And there's a reason for that, because the letterhead supplies a certain sobriety or gravitas that I wanted to communicate. There's only been 2 instances when I've used that option, and I do not regret that. And I think it is very obvious by the signature block that I'm not speaking for the council, or that Mike and Mike were not speaking for the council. And I think it's unnecessary to think that, where's the teeth in this? I can guarantee you can write this. And if I had a reenactment of the Mike and Mike letter situation or a reenactment of this situation, I'd write it, Bruce. I'd write it. I'd write it on city business letterhead for the explicit purpose of raising eyebrows on the council and saying, because we do emails back and forth all the time. But the reason for me putting it on letterhead is because it raised to a level of seriousness that I wanted people, first of all, I wanted to ensure that I put a lot of thought into it, because I knew when the people on our fellow council members saw it, that they also would take time and really look at it and think about it. So for that reason, this paragraph 4.7, no, I completely disagree with it. Others?
A question. In 4.7, when it says conduct of official city business or communicating messages of the city, that's line 2, it seems nowhere in here is there the ability to communicate as a city council. It's just of the city. And so I didn't know if the city and city council is
probably that should say city council. Probably should. This is about agreements amongst yourselves. It really isn't about, as I said, communicating messages of the city of Mercer Island as an administration. As I said, we do that all the time, and I am, on behalf of the staff, empowered to do that by you. But what seems to be up for discussion is how does the council itself communicate in letters.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. One more, just one more point. I think we should look at this aside from, Mike and Mike's letter, Mike and Mike's letter, in that, Mike may have put in a lot of, thought and respect in how he uses the letterhead, and I'm thinking of this as a broader issue of somebody who isn't clean, who might be on the council in the future and use it for in inappropriate means. And so I think the opportunity to clarify would be helpful as a again, recently new city council member, not knowing I could see somebody stepping into this one accidentally, and so having this as a guideline or as a rule can be very helpful. And I had one other point, but now I can't remember. But
come back to you.
Thank you.
Debbie.
I think I'd also like a little bit of guidance from a legal perspective. So, say that I had some crazy idea in my head and I wanted to put it on city letterhead and send it out even to a body or an entity beyond Mercer Island, where maybe there's some forgiveness or not. What jeopardy could that put the city in, first of all? Because if there's a liability that comes with that, then I think we all need to accommodate that irrespective of a specific city member. But I also, have to say, with that thought in mind, I don't disagree with what other of the Mikes have said, because in effect, when I saw it on letterhead, I did sit up and I did read it. And I do say that I read all the emails, but there was a gravitas that came with it. I don't want to deny that factor. And I don't want to almost exclude an urgency level that one council member or multiple council members can communicate to others. And maybe with Mike's suggestion of having a name on the top of it, that's a way of doing it. But I think ultimately, in my mind, it first and foremost comes down to what would be the implications if there was irresponsible use of any form of letterhead for the city and/or the council before I could go forward.
Just to add to what Deb was mentioning, it seems to me that an easy solution would be to use the city logo at the top and the individual's name, comma, city council members, City of Mercer Island, and all the rest. It comes from an individual, because I also don't want mine to be associated with something that maybe, some unclean member of the city council would send, with the implication that I'm with that person, that this comes from the body, and it does not. I think there are times when we want to have our name there because it represents the ideas and thoughts and opinions of the city council, and we want to differentiate that with an individual city council member. And we just need to clarify that. It seems pretty simple.
Rich is over here saying,
Well, I just whispered, it's a slippery slope. If you all have individual letterheads, instead of having one or two instances in 5 years, you'll have a lot of letters going out with the city's logo and your names. That's what I would predict. It will become very commonplace. Lots of correspondence going out.
But, each council member has their own business cards. They hand those out frequently.
And we have,
I think the other issue here...
Let Mike.
I think the other issue here, too, that needs to be clarified is internal versus external dissemination of the information. So maybe somehow we need to tier this policy so that it addresses communication within the council, between council members, and then any external dissemination of information. Because to me, those are significantly different.
Dan.
Yeah, just listening to the discussion, I don't think we're going to adopt this tonight, one way or the other, or make a final decision on this tonight. I think you look at every other legislative body, and it is a true statement, at least that I'm aware of, that if on the state legislature, the federal Congress, they all have letterhead which says U.S. Congress or U.S. Senate or U.S. House of Representatives, and underneath it the name of the individual member or individual senator. So that is, I think, more the norm than the exception. I would not for a moment suggest we expend city resources to print letterhead. If people want to be provided with electronic letterhead that they can use for their purposes, I think that's probably appropriate. I think all this amendment was trying to do was get us out of two problems that we have. One is to eliminate the possibility that the position of the City of Mercer Island or the position of the City Council of Mercer Island could be misrepresented or misstated. I think we can all agree that that's entirely appropriate, that the position of the city should not be misrepresented or misstated. And no matter what you do, if you put something out which has nothing on it other than City Council or the City of Mercer Island, then a reader looking at that will assume that it is the position of the City Council or the City of Mercer Island. And the truth be told, none of us have that authority to put out a letter like that, and to do it, I would suggest, is a serious dereliction of our duty to do so. Secondly, the issue of providing gravitas, we should then have individualized letterhead, and that can provide all the gravitas that people want to have. If that's what people need on this council, they feel that they can't be serious enough without having letterhead, that's great. So we can have individualized letterhead. But, let's not waste a lot of time on this. If I'd like to take just a position saying that if we want that whether up or down an individualized letterhead, and then have, if it's an upvote, then have staff maybe design very individualized thing that could be sent out electronically to people, that people could then cut and paste and revise the rule to make it clear that individualized letterhead is fine, but that any use of other city letterhead or city council letterhead is prohibited. And Mike, in terms of that you will just I know you well enough, knowing you as I do not think you would flagrantly violate a rule. That's not your nature, and I would hope that that would never be the case.
Did you want to make a motion then, Dan? You sort of wove in some of the points there.
Yeah, I would move that that staff be directed to design individualized electronic letterhead and return to the council with a rule permitting use of the individualized letterhead, but otherwise prohibiting the use of city or city council letterhead by individual council members.
Second.
Discussion.
So I'm assuming this will come back in front of us for review before we, okay. Very well, thank you.
I won't. Al, do you feel like you've got the language of that well enough to work with it? Okay, because I'm not going to try and repeat it.
She's got it.
All those in favor of the motion signify, Jane was the second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you all for letting us take that diversion this evening. We're at 8 o'clock. I assume we're okay going until 9 or so? Or, okay, break?
Let's break.
Break. Please come back as soon as possible. Okay, we're back from our break. So we now come to Agenda Bill 4757, South Fire Station and Fire Apparatus Replacement Ballot Measure, second reading.
Mr. Mayor, staff's prepared to get you through second reading of the ordinance you reviewed 2 weeks ago, with the goal that, if adopted, would place the question of a levy for construction of a new fire station on the south end on the November ballot. As I'm sure you'll hear, if you're going to do this year, you've got to do it tonight. We have Chip's going to come in and walk you through the ordinance provisions and numbers. Noel will then be here to talk to you about some of the other related issues that this levy proposition brings up. We have Deanna Gregory here. There she is, our bond counsel, to help you answer any questions about the bond ordinance. And we'll let her rip.
Okay. Chip. Good evening. For the record, your Finance Director, Chip Corder. I just have a very short presentation. We'll just quickly run the council through what's changed from last council meeting. As a reminder, the council directed staff to pull out the self-contained breathing apparatus, the SCBA equipment, at $53,000 a year. There's nothing in there regarding that. Also, you directed us to reduce the scope of fire apparatus replacement from multiple units to a single fire rescue truck, so that reduced the annual funding I had projected from $99,000 a year to $54,000 a year. Big picture, in terms of the numbers, here's what it looks like. The South Fire Station is a little over $4.8 million. The fire rescue truck, $415,000, for a total of $5.22 million in round numbers. That amount would be financed through two different debt vehicles. One would be general obligation bonds, and then the second vehicle that's related to the fire station, 9-year bonds. And the second, in terms of the fire rescue truck, would be financed through a lease purchase, a capital lease. We actually would own it, most likely a 9-year lease. The average annual levy impact for both is $662,000 a year on average for each of the 9 years. I provide you the estimated levy rate. Those are high. I have to, as I tried to explain at the last council meeting, we've had 3 years in a row where our assessed valuation has decreased. And remember, the law as it relates to property taxes in the state applies to, is with respect to the levy amount. Okay, so as assessed valuation goes up, typically, in normal situations, the levy rate comes down to make sure we can only collect a 1%, no more than 1% greater of the current year's levy. When the assessed valuation comes down, your rate goes up to make sure you collect the right levy amount, right? And so I've just, to be conservative, I've simply assumed a 5% reduction in assessed valuation. I've talked to King County Assessor's Office. They're guessing at this point in time it'll be flat. Okay, but just to protect ourselves, I'm assuming a 5% reduction. So those rates on there that you see, the levy rate related to the South Fire Station, you can read that as 7.9 cents. The fire rescue truck is 0.7 of 1 cent. Okay, those are high. And the net result is in terms of the annual property tax impact, again, I show you the median value. In 2012, the median value is $700,000 in Ireland. The average value, that's the waterfront properties kind of pull that up in particular, is almost $1 million. Okay? And so I show you what's the impact for the $700,000 home, total of $60.20. What I think it's really going to be, probably about $3 to $5 less than that. Okay? So that gives you a sense of the conservatism built into the number. That's a high number. That's a ceiling. For the $995,000 home, the $80, almost $6, probably about $5 to $6 less than that's what I think is really going to happen. But again, this is just purely legal stuff. Just we have to show a maximum levy rate and amount. With that, let me invite Noel up, Deputy City Manager, to go over next steps.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Noel Treat, Deputy City Manager. I want to just talk with you about a few items, next steps that will come to play if you decide to adopt the ordinance tonight. First, it's just to remind you that there are some key election deadlines that are coming up in the very near future. One of the most important is actually occurring tomorrow. We must submit an ordinance to King County Elections tomorrow if we want to have a measure appear on the fall ballot. The second is, in order to get our local voters pamphlet submitted in time, we need to have a pro and con committee appointed, and we need to do that and submit those names to King County Elections by August 10th. Thank you.
Tim?
Yes. If we are going to move forward with this proposal to the voters, the city is authorized under state law to conduct a public information process, and we will do that in a variety of formats. First, we will include information on our website and in the Mercer Island Weekly. Second, we'll provide some presentation to interested community groups. We can provide an informational mailing to all city residents, and we would plan to do that. And the goal in this informational outreach is to just make sure that our citizens understand some of the key facts. It's not intended to be a pro-advocacy piece. It's intended to provide neutral facts to our residents about the measure that they'll see on the ballot. So we will explain to voters and residents why we think there's a need for the station. We'll talk about the size, and I know that's been an important consideration, so that voters understand the scope. And then we'll also make sure people have information about the cost and levy impacts of the measure.
So will you elaborate on that? So you just said that it's an impartial analysis of the bond and levy. So, I mean, there are pros and cons to the best of best ideas. So does that mean that you're going to list the pros and cons of this levy in its present state, let's say, or of the fire station?
No, I think what we would provide would be an outline of why this station would be needed.
So how can it be impartial? I mean, I guess and this also involves my sensitivity on the communications director. So how can it be impartial if you're just going to supply the benefits of it?
We wouldn't be talking about the benefits. We'd be talking about why we think that
the facts. I mean, there are facts on both sides.
Neutral facts. We aren't going to make advocacy statements or arguments on either the pro or the side of it.
In fact, I think we would be held accountable for making any sort of pro or con statements at all by the Public Disclosure Commission. We couldn't do what you're suggesting legally. All we can do is just give factual information. The issues about the benefits or the not benefits in the debate actually happen here at the City Council. You've had them, and you will presumably, later tonight vote to put this on the ballot. Our job is to explain what is going on that ballot. In terms of advocacy or information that would suggest don't vote for this, that is totally fair game, just can't be by city staff. That comes in the public or community debate.
Right. That's part of the election and the campaign process, which city staff and resources cannot be allowed to participate in.
So, Rich, we could do that on our own letterhead.
A really special letterhead, yes, you can.
Yeah, so this is a general word of advisement to the council and the city staff. Once you take action and put this on the ballot, city resources cannot be used to advocate or to oppose the ballot measure. So that means city email, city printing, all those sorts of things cannot be used as part of a campaign either for or against. And that's an important point for us all to remember going forward. And then one of the other pieces we wanted to be sure that you were aware of that we were looking at is bringing on a professional project manager. We wanted to do that in the near term for a couple of reasons. One is that would provide us with someone with expertise and the resource to negotiate the final design contract with the architecture firm. And then second, it would provide a resource to help coordinate some of this public information that we'll need to put together and provide to our citizens. We're looking at really about $5,000 max for that work between now and the election. This isn't an absolute necessity, but we think it's a prudent thing to do to let us get that design contract done in particular and be ready to go should the voters approve this measure. We'll then be able to get off and running into the bidding process, the contracting process, and move forward expeditiously.
And why the big rush to front-load this project manager? I can understand the need, the administrative deadline to hit the election deadlines, but I'm unclear of the mission rush, the mission requirement to get the fire station all built, and that requires this public information coordinator.
Well, like I said, there's 2 points. One, on the public information coordination, we know that between now and the election, there's going to be public records requests, there's going to be media inquiries, there's going to be community groups that want us to come and present the facts behind this measure. This would be a resource to help us coordinate some of that effort. As the City Council is aware, we have a vacant communication coordinator position right now at the city. It's one that hasn't been filled for a while. This person would help step in and do some of that type of work for this measure. And then second, we need to negotiate a final design contract with the architecture firm. The person we're looking at for this project manager role is actually someone who used to work for that architecture firm, has an understanding of their pricing and business practices, and would be in a good position to help us negotiate a favorable contract. By getting that contract in place before the election, that really lets us be ready to go off and running should the voters approve the measure, which in the end may help shave some time off when we can get bids on the street and perhaps leverage a favorable construction environment. Now, that's not, again, like I said, that's not an absolute necessity. We think it's a prudent thing to consider, given where we are, given our lack of a communications coordinator on staff at this point in time. And then, of course, this person, that would then also tee them up post-election to help with final design, the bidding, and then, of course, construction management as we moved into later phases of the project.
So let's pause for just a second. I see a couple hands going up. This is an interesting question, but a very small question relative to the broader measure. And what I would suggest, and Dan's nudging me on this, and I think it's a good point, if we could set this question aside until we get through the much larger questions and then come back to this after the fact. I mean, we are talking just about $5,000 here as opposed to something that's worth $5 million. So let's get through that and then come back and fight this one.
Okay. And so finally, just, there are 3 actions that are in front of you tonight. First is to consider adoption of ordinance number 12-04. Second is to authorize the mayor to appoint a citizens pro and con committee for the voters pamphlet. As I mentioned a minute ago, the deadline for having those committees named is August 10th. So getting the council back together to fully discuss the names of those committees probably is not practical. So what you could do tonight would be authorize the mayor to finalize those lists. I know there's already been some individuals identified for both pro and con, but that would allow us to meet this deadline. And then the final question is the one regarding contracting now with the project manager. So those are the 3 actions before you tonight.
Thank you, Bill. So do we come to questions now? Is that the point where we are, or is there more presentation to come? Okay, so questions for either Chip or Noel. Mike?
Chip and Noel, a couple questions. One, so what's been presented in the packet, good job, by the way, and I went through it in some details, so I think I have a pretty good understanding of the council history on it. But the key questions, 2 key questions that I have are, is the chief in agreement with this and the union? And there's going to be a certain amount of disruption as we're building the new facility. So if you can walk me through a little bit how that disruption is going to occur physically and what are the associated costs with that disruption?
For the record, Chris Tubbs, Fire Chief. In regards to my support, the answer to that is yes. I can't speak for the union, wouldn't presume to do that. In regards to the transition phase, when the construction would occur, be very similar to what we did with Station 91, and we've already begun some work in looking at a temporary quarters site, and we would have temporary quarters available for our staff during that construction phase, and when the construction was complete, personnel and equipment would move into the new facility.
Okay. I forgot one last question, Mr. Mayor, if you can indulge me just one more time. So we've taken the equipment cost off of the ballot measure. Chief, can you speak a little bit in terms of Vehicle replacements, are we okay on that regard, and equipment replacements? How are we going to fund those, and are we in good shape on those two fronts?
I'll probably have to let Chip answer some of those questions, but we are on track currently. We just placed an order for a new fire engine that will be delivered next year. Clearly, there's some funding challenges before council in regards to the gap under the apparatus replacement model. Correct.
As I mentioned to the council last council meeting, that even with the approval of the $54,000 a year for the fire rescue truck, the sinking fund that's dedicated to replacing fire apparatus will go negative in 2016. So my intent was to really discuss this during the budget process with the council. I got a plan B and a plan C, and that we can talk about, what are options and what makes sense going forward. You have some time. You don't need to decide this year. If you want to wait till next year, you can do that. But I just want to put it on your radar. We need to talk about that.
Okay. Other questions? If there's a
Oh, yeah, I just had a quick question about the project manager. That funding comes from the sewer lake line savings? Is that right, still?
Yes, exactly, because it's already appropriated, available for that purpose.
And the design work to date?
The design work to date has been coming, and of course with that design work to date, the $100,000 of pre-design work, the intention was to recapture that through the issuance of bonds.
Well, we want to kind of clarify, because there's actually a two-part answer there.
Yeah, and then in terms of that project manager post-election, in terms of managing final design, bidding, and construction, that's built into the levy measure itself and will be paid for by levy and bond proceeds as we move forward.
So the Lakeline dollars that we have already earmarked for the pre-design, we will use those for this initial $5,000 worth of just sort of getting this up and running, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to clarify, the truck, the one truck is already on order. It's already, it's already financed.
A fire engine, correct, not the rescue vehicle.
It's a pumper. It's the pumper we approved at a prior council meeting.
All right. I saw on there, on your presentation where it said 8,000 feet maximum. That's a change. So our design here, I think, is 8,200 feet.
Yeah, I think the design going into the planning session had a number over 8,000 square feet. There was a lot of discussion at that session and at a subsequent council meeting about the need to really do everything we can to contain the scope and size of the facility. And in working with the architects, they're confident we can bring this in at under 8,000 square feet.
So we sat down with them and discussed in detail that question, that not sacrificing any of the program or the functionality of the building. They said, you have to keep in mind, they're at a pretty early design level. There's so much more they have to do in terms of just working out and designing details. They felt comfortable that they would be able to have it under 8,000 square feet, but they aren't going to do that design until after the levy is approved. So our agreement that we had with them was that for the purposes of public information, we would be prepared to say that the station would come in at $79.50 would be at the preliminary design level, with the final design size to be set at completion of construction documents. And they were very comfortable with that statement.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, I've got two, and actually I'm going to just thank Ira for offering them. So the first is, he said this is in his recollection, the first time there's been a ordinance with no public hearing. Why not? Can you help, somebody help with whether this is true, not true, or what history tells us, and what the process should or shouldn't be around this kind of thing?
I think that we're doing this exactly as we've done in the past with regard to these levy lifts, and I guess maybe I'm just unclear on the actual question, because I think we're doing it properly in accordance with statute and with how we've done it in the past. I don't see the difference.
I guess I was thinking about that as well. The council has had a number of public sessions in which public testimony was solicited, either through appearances or otherwise, most recently 2 weeks ago. When you made the decision to move forward with design with a target of making this decision for 2012, you did that as part of your mid-biennial budget review last November, which actually was a public hearing. There was a formal public hearing throughout that whole process, correct? Yep. Yes. So I think from a technical point of view, I think that public hearing did occur from a more generic public involvement opportunity point of view, that throughout all of this process, when you've been in the council chambers, there has been opportunities for public comment.
There's also been 2 open houses down at the south end where the public was invited, and public did come to look at preliminary drawings, so I think it's pretty well vetted.
And the second question you'd raised was, weren't all of the decisions made at the planning session and therefore made incorrectly because the planning session is not to be about final decision? So I raise it. I don't have an exact recollection of what came out of planning session versus what happened subsequently, but
It is correct that we look at the planning sessions as places where the council gives staff direction to be formally decided at a city council meeting. And I believe everything that you discussed and gave direction on at the planning session was incorporated into the final design book that was presented to you along with the first reading of the ordinance 2 weeks ago. And you either explicitly or implicitly blessed all of those conversations we had in June.
In fact, we did even something different than that, because we not only gave direction at the planning session, then we reversed that direction during the next meeting, because we actually took stuff out of the direction we had taken, because the original direction was to include more into this levy than we did. So after discussing it in open council session, with the benefit of everyone who was there at that night, we actually we made the real decision, which turned out to be different than what we had, the direction we gave at the planning session.
And I will add that at the point in time, should the levy pass and such, and the actual contract come before the council for the actual design, there's going to be additional opportunities to, as we refine this process, to weigh in on it and to make the ultimate decisions, the ultimate substantive decisions.
thank you all for those answers. Okay, so we've done questions. I think we're to, did you have something you want to say?
Yes,
I was going to come to motion, so did you want to?
Yeah, I just, as I've advised the council in advance of the meeting, I'm going to make a motion that's not on the page here. And it's specifically to address the issue of the size of the facility. And I appreciate what the deputy city manager and city manager said, but I think that what we have right now out in the public are some documents which could be referred to as suggesting that this facility is going to be larger than it's actually going to be. And I feel that the council needs to be very clear with the voters and the citizens as to what the size of this facility will be. So I'm going to move to direct staff to ensure that the gross floor area of the new fire station shall be less than 8,000 square feet and otherwise as efficient as is feasible, consistent with public safety requirements.
Second.
And if I can speak to the motion further?
Yeah, and let me just be clear. So this is you're not making this as an amendment to the motions that are proposed here, but as a unique motion.
Right, because I don't want to confuse the ordinance adoption motion, which I think might give Katie heartache. So I'd rather just keep that as this is a separate motion, clean from the adoption of the ordinance.
Okay.
And again, so this is we have. I think it's very important. Obviously, we learned a lot of lessons from the school bond, and one of them is that we need to be very clear with the electorate as to what we're asking them to approve. And I don't want people to start saying it's an 8,500-foot, 9,000-foot, 8,250, or anything else. This is, I think staff has already shown that we can get this down under 8,000 without compromising anything, and this is where, this way we can make an explicit statement as to what the size of this facility is going to be.
Anyone else wish to speak on the motion?
Well, why 8,000? Why not?
I hope it's going to be less than 8,000, as that's why I've said it should be otherwise as efficient as feasible, consistent with public safety requirements. I'm sure staff is going to do what they can with the architects to come in with a number that meets those requirements. So, and as Katie also said, that they're going to come back to us after this bond issue is approved, if it is approved, and we're going to have to go through that, but at least we will set an upward parameter here so we know and the citizens know that it will not exceed that.
Tom?
As Dan mentioned, he gave us advance notice about this, and I wasn't sure how I felt because I think that it's very important that we design a fire station that meets fire needs, and to offer our artificial suggestion on how to constrain that seemed not a proper role. However, hearing that the staff feels comfortable that we can get it under 8,000, I was very supportive of that. I also looked at, if you look at the population in 1960 and the population now, if you do the math, the square footage is almost exactly proportionate. So when opponents are saying that, why do we have to have a fire station? The fire station built in 1962 meets our needs to this day. I would, offer that, again, the square footage, if you look at based on the population, this is keeping pace with fire needs and population. So I'm supportive of this motion.
Okay.
I'm going to vote against this motion. I'm very much in favor of a fire station, but I think we're getting into designing from the dais here, and I don't think it's our role. We have preliminary designs that show a very well-designed, very well-vetted fire station at 8,200 square feet. The fire chief and several firefighters I know and staff have gone through the plans over and over again with the architect, have brought it down to a reasonable size. They've used spaces in ways that the same space can be used for a couple of different things. They've made compromises and gotten it down to what it needs to be. Piggybacking on what Councilmember Sen said, when this fire station was built, the population was 12,000 people, and there was a part-time fire force using it, and they were volunteers. So the times have changed. We need a fire station that we are comfortable, that we're proud of, and I don't think we should constrain the architects. I would like to, I will be voting against this because I think we should allow the architects to go forward with 8,200 square feet that really does fit this community and that this community can be proud of. I don't want to lop off a 12 by 10 entryway. It just doesn't make sense. So I'll be opposing the motion.
Anyone else? Mike?
I'll actually be joining Councilmember Brown on the vote as well, because although I would love to help design the building, and particularly to LEED standards, I think we've given enough parameters in terms of cost, et cetera, up to this point, and I'd leave it up to the project manager and the design and architecture firm to come back with a top-rate facility. So thanks for all of the hard work.
Mike? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll support the motion for the simple reason that, just bringing it down to 8,000, I think you could easily bring it down to 7,000, but I'll take what I can get, so I'll support the 8,000.
On your way to supporting the overall measure, I'm sure. All right, anyone else? All in favor of, Dan, could you read the motion again?
Direct staff to ensure that the gross floor area of the new fire station shall be less than 8,000 square feet, and otherwise as efficient as is feasible, consistent with public safety requirements.
Signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, so that passes on a vote of 5-2. Okay, I'm hoping for another motion.
Mayor, I would adopt ordinance number 12-04, instructing King County Elections to place a $662,000 per year fire station and fire apparatus replacement levy lid lift for a period of 9 years on the November 6, 2012 Mercer Island general election ballot.
Second.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment.
Tom is up first, and Mike, you have an amendment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to change the $662,000 to $608,000 and delete and fire apparatus replacement.
Okay, is there a second for that? All right, so that fails for lack of a second. Back to the main motion. Is there discussion on the main motion?
I think just to make it clear to everyone who's maybe not followed this closely as people up here in the council, what this, with the assistance of bond counsel or legal counsel, this has been very narrowly drafted now to ensure that the proceeds can only be used for the fire station and a rescue truck, and avoid any question that this money could be diverted to non-fire apparatus uses. There's one of the issues that was raised in the school election was someone took a very standard clause that appears in most of these bonds and levies and used it to suggest that the school board could go and have a huge party with the money and not actually build school buildings or build something completely different. That language was taken out of, or was not included in this, specifically to avoid that question. This is a tightly drawn ordinance which very much circumscribes what the use of these proceeds are, and I think that's important. I think it's important that the public be assured that these monies will be used for the purposes intended, and that we have acted with that direction in mind.
Jimmy?
I'd like to say I give this measure my unequivocal support. Having been in the throes of a campaign just a year ago, it was definitely a source of conversation. And what struck me was the history behind the need for the fire station. If I recall correctly, this has gone back to essentially 1996, 1997, when the first reports of insufficiency or lack of sufficient standards in the building were established. So it's historic. This isn't a new item. This is definitely one that's been on the books for a while, and I believe it's time for the community here and now to ensure that we are not only bringing our current services up to standards, but that we can provide services both as the island demographics change and also the nature of the services that people expect change. One of the interesting things that did come out in the last year to me is that it's not always just about a fire or a fire truck. It is about the need for quick response and first aid. I think our former mayor can attest to the importance of having critically serviced and capable staff on this island. The next point that I would call out is that I think this council has been very diligent in making sure that the cost and the services delivered have been critically reviewed by the chief of fire, various other organizations. It's been compared to other service stations in other geographies to make sure that we are both wise, prudent, fiscal, but yet ensuring that public safety is held first and foremost for our residents. So with that history, with that certainty, at least in my mind, that we need this station to maintain and support our population moving forward, then I'm going to support it in its entirety.
Very good. Other comments? Mike? Mike, on this end, and then I'll shift in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to echo what Debbie just mentioned. When I came on the council a few moons ago, three key issues were apparent in dealing with public safety. One, we didn't have a sinking fund to replace fire trucks. We didn't have an emergency water supply, and we had a fire station in the south end that was in dire need of repair. So I am more than pleased to say that by passing this agenda bill, we'll bat 1,000 and address all three of those issues here very shortly. So thank you to my fellow colleagues, to staff, and to all of the members of the police department for all your help with this. Really appreciate it.
Mike, and then Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I also, when I ran for election the first time, I also made the South End Fire Station an issue that I thought it needed replaced. And I by and large, still believe that. But that's not a blank check for what we have here. And I don't have any reservations in the level of risk that we might accept, the additional level of risk. I think there is no additional level of risk that we accept by not approving this package or delaying this package, whether it's for public support or public discussion or to revamp what is before us. So I also have campaigned for it, but it's not a blank check, and there's no increase in risk to our community, and the community needs to understand that. So I have, as you know, I have serious reservations, and I wish this council would have read me better in recognizing that if you separated the fire trucks and the equipment, you did the equipment, but separate the fire truck from this agenda item, you have my support. Warts and all, with what I might think is of the fire station, you'd have my support. But you did not choose that. So, you know, it kind of, all barrels are out now. And the issue is, it's a principle of budgeting that we are violating. And that is to prioritize our budget, our resources for public safety first. And that was the very grand idea that they had in 2003 with the sinking fund. And by approving this, or I should say the opposite, if we did not have the fire truck, on this bond, then we would send a clear signal to staff and also to the other elements of the government that we want our public safety requirements financed first and foremost. And then you can use the rest of the budget, property taxes, etc., to finance the other things. And we have the money to do that. We will not be without a fire truck replacement. We'll have to change some things, but we will not be in a jam. Okay? So if we let the fire truck off and finance the fire truck as our wise brethren did in 2003 by design with a sinking fund, as we should have been financing first, and it should be fully financed right now, and we shouldn't have that discussion. We shouldn't be having this discussion. If we did that back in as was set out in 2003, then we wouldn't have the issue that we're having right now. Now we can right ourselves. We can right ourselves with the monies that we have and take that fire truck off. So, for instance, you know, the ball's always thrown back in my corner. Mike, where's all this money going to come from? Well, it could come from the sewer lake line savings, the $350,000. We could replenish the sinking fund. It could come from the beautification fund, another $250,000 that's just sitting there. It could come from the arts fund. You're talking about priorities. It could come from the monies sitting there for the, for lack of a better term, the Pyramid Plaza. And then I already said the sewer lake line. So there's the money out there not to violate the principles that were established in 2003 with, first and foremost, financing the sinking fund. Now I'll get into the issues that I otherwise would not have mentioned. But since we're going to keep this fire truck and violate the sinking fund principles and what I think is good, prudent financial management of city budget, I'll go into some of the issues that I have with the firehouse. So, the connection with the per capita size of the firehouse doesn't register. So our fire services like fire stations, the police, they increase in a step manner. You come to a tipping point, if you will, where you can accept more and more, and then you come to a tipping point, and then there's a jump increase. So, we've had 3 firefighters down there for a long time, and we'll continue to have 3 firefighters down there for a long time. Remember, after all the expansion in the last 10 years, we only increased 663 on this island. So we're not going to attract a point where the demand's going to require that we fill that 4th extra bunk in this fire station to have 4 firefighters down there. We're talking, my original guidance, obviously not taken, was it's a satellite station. It has limited mission requirements. The community doesn't want a building that's almost twice as large, 4,600 to 8,000. The community doesn't need that. I'm not sure the community will support that. And as much as they support public safety, they'll see through that. I can cut this thing down to 7,100 feet, easy. Do we need, our firefighters are there and they're working. They're training, they're maintaining equipment. I don't see the need to have a 180 square foot day room that accommodates, in the picture, 3 lazy boys. 1, it doesn't sell very good to the public, and 2, it's a satellite station. We need a conference room down there? We don't need a conference room down there. It's a satellite station. They're there to do their job, and if there's a conference or they need a meeting, they drive up to the main station, 91. That's the way you do. That's the definition of a satellite station. The lobby. I question the need for the lobby. The receiving room / garden storage, another 100 square feet. This stuff adds up. I don't see that we don't have it now. I question the need for it. And then if you could possibly wiggle this down to one square single floor option, you eliminate 2 of the wash closets as another additional 120 feet. You eliminate the stairs, another 176 foot. The receiving room, eliminate that, 100 foot, 90 foot. Eliminate the lift station, 50 foot. So I wish I didn't have to necessarily bring this stuff up, but we don't need this. It's almost extravagant. The fire station is turning almost extravagant, maybe extravagant. And we violate the principles, the good, solid principles that were laid out in 2003, and for what I thought was being relatively followed, but evidently not. And we've buckled under the hard decisions of financing priority public safety issues, the sinking fund, for other projects that I've articulated that have a real fat balance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Tana, you want to go next?
Sure. I think I will let my heart comments from last meeting stand for itself, because I don't think I could repeat them, but
here's this.
So obviously I support this piece. But speaking from the head, I've been trying to convince Mike. I've been working on him for the past couple of weeks, so obviously haven't succeeded, but I've been working hard. I do, yeah. But just, one last-ditch effort, Mike. I think that you can make your clear signal and stick to your principles during the budget time, and that, but also ultimately, I think if we wait on this, that you're going to give up one of your other key points for the community, which is saving our taxpayers' money. And I think by waiting and pushing this farther and farther out, taxpayers are actually going to be paying more than they would for a fire station and a fire truck than they would just for a fire station if we get to a point where bond rates have gone up significantly. So I think to look at the cost to our citizens of your clear signal is actually very expensive for them. And that by supporting this, that you can give a clear signal during budget time and also save taxpayer money by taking advantage of this great bond opportunity.
I think he's ready to change his mind. Other comments at this point?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say I heartily support this this measure. Piggybacking on what Thomas said, we're going for a 9-year levy too, which will save a lot of money over the long run. So if you add up interest rates, and everybody knows that you pay less in the long run for a 15-year mortgage than you do for a 30-year. So we will own this fire station, and it will be a beauty. It's designed by Miller Hull. Did a good job on the community center. We've worked with them before. I think. I have confidence, too, that it will be a well-designed building that will probably, I hope, come in under 8,000 square feet, although I don't want to tie an architect to that. But I know that we just learned in the results of the community survey that the fire department is the most loved entity on the island, with 94% approval rating. So,
and we're a little bit
we are very proud of them, and want to build a building for not just the next couple of years, but for the next 50 years that the whole community can be proud of, and I'm happy to support it.
Dan?
No, I'm not going to try to convince Mike, because that would be exercise in futility. But some of the statements that were made are just, I can't be allowed to stand. First, the notion that the sinking fund was some wise act done by the 2003 City Council, well, that may be true, but maybe you don't understand how the sinking fund was created. That was created by using excess taxing capacity. So we made the decision back then to do what you have opposed at every step of the way, which is actually increase taxes above the 1% in order to create that sinking fund, which you're so impressed with these days. I would suggest to you that if you're so enamored with the sinking fund and you now recognize that it is inadequate, which in fact we all know it is because of various circumstances, you should be the first to want to raise taxes even further in order to fully fund the sinking fund. But my guess is, Mike, that there's no way in the world you'll ever vote for that, because you never voted for a tax increase since you've been on this council. Secondly, the notion that we are not putting our community at risk is absurd. Obviously, if the fire station was adequate, then none of us would be sitting here and saying that there's any need to replace it. The last thing that we want to spend money on is something that's a prettier building. We all know, though, that that fire station is not safe. We all know that there's some inherent construction defects in that fire station. That means it will not survive a significant earthquake. And it is the idea that the fire station, one of the two facilities in this island, which is designed to be our first response line of defense to a major public safety event, is not by itself safe, suggests to me that there is a huge risk out there, and that the sooner we address that risk, the sooner we are doing something for our community, which is exactly what we're supposed to do. As you said, public safety is our highest priority. And to defer a clear public safety risk because you want to make a fight over a rescue truck is I find, quite incredible to accept. Finally, you point very eloquently to various other sources of funding that you think could pay for that rescue truck. I think, Mike, you're as conversant as anyone on this council is with what the revenue numbers look like over the next 5 or 10 years. And you know that there's going to be no lack of funding requirements that this city is going to face over that period, even if we do nothing with all the various funds that you refer to, because every penny of those monies will be required just to meet ongoing operating expenses. So this is not a situation where we have a lot of money sitting in accounts that are just burning a hole in our pockets. We have some real pressing financial problems coming up in the years ahead. Anyone who looks at the numbers knows that's the case. We would be poor fiscal managers if we were to dissipate the only funds we have available to address those in the short term. And so what we're doing here is not only the right thing to do from a public safety standpoint, it's the right thing to do from a standpoint of being fiscally responsible.
Thanks, Dan. I'll add a couple points of my own here. And actually, I guess the first is perhaps to echo and strengthen Jane's final comment, which is our existing station is 50 years old. And it is a building that has served us well over the 50 years, but it is a building that is well ready to be replaced with a building for the next 50 years. And I think it would be very short-sighted of us to consider, a fourth bunk would be a waste of our money, or a conference room would be a waste of our money, when we have had so much change over the past 50 years that the building has been radically changed over that time. Looking forward, building in a little bit of flexibility is only prudent, and for us to do the bare minimum of what is needed today would simply set ourselves up for costs in the future that we ought not set ourselves up for. So I think we have to build in a bit of flexibility there. To Mike's comment that this is an extravagance, we've made clear as a council that we wanted a tight project and one that met the need but did no more. And I think we've heard very clearly from Chief Tubbs and from staff that they have made significant effort to tie together the functioning of the North Fire Station with the functioning of the South Fire Station so as not to repeat unnecessarily functionality, and to keep this building to the real needs they have. So I have to say that I think it's it's just not fair to call this an extravagance. That seems to me to be beyond a reasonable statement. So I'm strongly supportive of this. I think we've ended up in a good spot here, and I will be supporting the motion. With that, I think everybody's had a say. Does anybody feel like they've got to chip in again before we vote? All right. With that.
And Mr. Mayor, just really quickly, because the city clerk and I have been doing some research back here, so I can assure you that we've looked at the RCW, we've complied with all the requirements, and it appears that the question with regard to the public hearing, we've never done that before, had to do with resolutions regarding the council's stance on particular past ballot measures, which does require a public hearing. So that's a nuance, but that is not what's happening here tonight.
I'm not sure I quite followed that, but I think what you just told me is we're on solid footing here.
Exactly.
She's referring to like state ballot measures and whether or not you need to have a public hearing, whether or not you're going to support or oppose somebody else's ballot measure.
I see.
That's a very different process.
Exactly. And so what you're doing here tonight is compliance with the statute.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of adopting ordinance number 12-04, instructing King County Elections to place a $662,000 per year fire station and fire apparatus replacement levy lid lift for a period of 9 years on the November 6, 2012 Mercer Island general election ballot, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Motion carries on a vote of 6-1. Okay, we come now, thank you very much. We come now to, let's have a motion, then we'll talk about it.
I would like to move the mayor to appoint 3 citizens to the Pro Committee and 3 citizens to the Con Committee to prepare statements for and against the proposed ballot measure, ordinance number 1204, for the local voters pamphlet.
Second.
Okay, so I will speak to the fact that Allie's done a lot of work, or maybe not for her a lot of work, but seems like a lot in terms of advertising this to the community as we're required to do. And we additionally have had conversations with citizens about the possibility of acting on pro and con committees. 3 folks have stepped up already and said they would be happy to participate as the pro committee. Jim Pearman, El Jenke, and Patty Darling have all said that they would serve in that capacity. So we actually could appoint them as a council tonight, or you can leave that to me if you're comfortable with this motion as it's written. On the con side, folks have been talked to, folks have considered it, and I think we may well get there shortly, but we're not quite there yet. So that's left open, and for the con side is the place where it really would be best if I had the authority to appoint people. So that's all I can add to this. Is there other comment or thought before we vote? Okay. Motion is to authorize the mayor to appoint 3 citizens to the Pro Committee and 3 citizens to the Con Committee to prepare statements for and against the proposed ballot measure, ordinance number 12-04, for the local voters pamphlet. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and we come now back to this question of the project manager. And do we want to, should we get to a motion first and then have a further discussion about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to authorize the city manager to contract with a project manager to provide project management and technical expertise to the city during the design, bidding, and construction phases of the project, as well as assistance in related contract negotiations and coordination of public information.
For a second.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Dan.
I'm going to vote against the motion. I think that it's unfortunately poorly worded. I think that it'll be used by people to contest in the election because they're going to stipulate that the city council has the gall to hire a project manager for a project which hasn't been approved yet. I think it would have been entirely appropriate to hire someone to assist in communications, but I think it is premature to be negotiating contracts with architects or do anything else that furthers the project until the voters have spoken on it. I think the city should be in a position to answer questions from its citizens about something that's important, but I don't think we should be moving forward with the project. So I'll vote against it and would be prepared to authorize the city manager, if this is turned down, to have a separate motion authorize the city manager to hire someone at a cost not to exceed $5,000 to assist in the communication function, but I wouldn't be prepared to support anything beyond that.
Okay. Debbie?
I think I would support Councilmember Grouse's recommendation. Again, I think that it would be somewhat presumptuous at this point, and I would not want it to be misinterpreted. So I would support an amendment or a revision that would support funding for the coordination of public information, but not the project management component.
Anyone else? I'm looking at this and seeing that I think what you were alluding to is it'd be difficult to offer an amendment that would change this. But Mike?
Well, I think it's a good idea. And, I daily work with construction-related projects, and to what extent you have someone who has an intimate knowledge of the design and construction capabilities and then can communicate that, that's a hard skill set to find. So I don't think just hiring somebody to handle communications is sufficient. In addition, I think it's a very good move to get somebody on board early, even before the election, to start working with the architect and looking at design specs where efficiencies can be gained and taking some of Mike's suggestions to heart, so that when the ballot measure is approved, they can literally hit the ground running and take advantage of a very favorable bid environment. Having said that, again, just hiring someone on communications, we won't be able to do that. And we'll lose a lot in the efficiencies, and we'll lose, quite frankly, a lot in the ability to save the taxpayer some money. So I think, quite frankly, staff should be commended for suggesting this, because it's used in so many other arenas to save money and time. And for that, I definitely approve it.
A question for staff. Can we get a sense of how much time in the project timeline could potentially are we talking about here? So moving forward with this now, we're at August, so August to November is how many months, and what's the impact on the overall project?
I think preliminarily we were hoping to shave off about 3 months. And have that final design contract wrapped up and ready to go. So that's the cost impact. I mean, the schedule impact.
Okay.
If we aren't able at this point to move forward with negotiating that design contract.
So let me understand this, Larry. You're suggesting it will take 3 months to complete these contract negotiations, and you're going to do that, and then the communication function all for less than $5,000? Does that make sense?
Right, and they're not obviously taking all their time over 3 months.
Well,
but in terms of in the back and forth of the contract negotiation, we'll see.
And that's a 3-month process in your mind?
I think as those things unwind, we could be fortunate. It could be quicker than that. But I'm trying to provide you with a good sense of what we are looking at. Also, remember, this person needs to get up to speed a little bit before they start the negotiation. I mean, there's a little bit of time there. With the $5,000, I mean, obviously, as we've expressed, we're comfortable with that as a limitation on any pre-election work, and we can contain that. So if that might be a way to move forward with an appropriate limitation, I think that would be something that would be easy to work with.
I would just suggest that first, you're talking about, you said you're not going to spend more than $5,000. You don't get a lot for $5,000. And my guess is if you truly keep to that limit, that person will be fully consumed in getting up to speed on the project as you described, and responding to the various communications requirements that are incident to this. What I find problematic is the notion that we have to then respond to questions from citizens saying, now let me understand this, you've negotiated a contract with an architect for a project which hasn't been approved. Now, why would you do that? And I wouldn't be able to answer that question, nor do I think you could answer that question, other than to say, well, we were trying to save time. Well, what happens if the project isn't approved? Then, well, I guess we didn't save any time then. So why do we have to have that discussion? I mean, I agree with Mike that if you have a project which you know is a go, yep, you need someone to help you negotiate the contracts and save money and everything. We don't know this project is a go yet. Until we know this project is a go, I don't see why we expend unnecessary funds.
Rich.
Staff doesn't care enough to have a fight over this. So if this is where you want to go and save the $5,000, you've already spent $100,000 on design work. Many of those same arguments could apply to the $100,000, but it really doesn't matter that much. If you really think this is going to be a big deal with the community, then let's wait. It gives us a little bit of a running start, but not a huge one. I would much rather have you be all excited and pumped up and ready to go, see this thing get built, and we'll just wait until December to do this.
Bruce, I will offer an amendment to the motion.
Dan, before you do that, let me respond to Rich, because I don't give in credit as easily, because I work with this stuff every day.
I know.
And
how you do it. this is the right way to do it.
Exactly. And, you know, there are many, many people that live on the island that understand that completely and would actually be very supportive, like I am, of what Noel and other members of the staff have done. So, you know, to put it in context, we're talking about a $5.2 million plus project, and we're going to, you know, we spent 15 minutes arguing about $5,000, when that $5,000 could, save it tens of thousands of dollars. So I would suggest that Mr. Grouse take his argument and hold on to it and realize that staff, quite frankly, has done a very good job here in trying to get out ahead of the curve, help with any uncertainties that there may be concerning the project, get somebody that communicates the details and understands them, and that's really important.
Okay, Jane, I think you had your hand up? If you didn't...
Forgot what I was going to say, but I concur with Councilman Grady, and I support the third part of the motion for the project manager.
Okay.
I'd like to offer an amendment.
Let me let Debbie go and then come back to that.
I think we all want to be as effective and as efficient as we can, and I think we all, express, with the exception of one council member, very strong support and advocacy for this project. But to me, a lot of it comes down to logistics. If we were to say that 50% of the $5,000 was going to be spent on project management, and let's just estimate $50 an hour for the sake of debate, you can correct me if it's wildly off, we're talking 50 hours. We're talking 50 hours that would go into that over the course of 2 months once they ramp up. I would like to think that in the event that on November 7th, 8th, the day after the election, and we have reasonable sense of the outcome, that 50 hours could be made up fairly quickly at that point. So I wouldn't want to see that this is in essence losing 2 months. So for me, it is something of a matter of principle, but recognizing the benefits and that do come from it. I just don't see that at the end of the day, $2,500 and 50 hours is sufficient to jeopardize a misunderstanding or misrepresentation of the project in the public's mind.
Okay, I feel like we're down a rabbit on this one, but Dan, you got a...
I would move to replace the main motion with the following motion: authorize the city manager to spend not more than $5,000 to hire an individual to assist in the coordination of public information.
Second.
Okay. Discussion on that amendment.
Next question, can they hire the same person they've been looking at?
That's up to the city manager.
If that's the case, Dan, you'll have my support.
That's what you would do? All right, we're hearing thumbs up here.
I'll say something to that. The communications, that's, you're becoming less efficient. I can't imagine that any communications that you need to do that involves this fire station can't be handled in-house with the staff that you have. I mean, that's what staff does.
Okay. Personally, I'm going to oppose the motion. I prefer the original. I think saving 3 months with the bidding environment we're in now, it seems to me that, yes, Dan, I agree there's some risk of people playing this up as, why are you going hog wild designing or creating contract, but the contract doesn't get signed until we actually get to the point of moving forward on this. And so I'm comfortable saying that laying the groundwork for that makes some sense when it's a very small amount of money. So that's my 2 cents worth. All in favor of, again, you're up.
Author to replace the main motion with authorize the city manager to spend not more than $5,000 to hire an individual to assist in the coordination of public information.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. So I think we're at 4-3 on that in opposition.
Can I see hands? I'm sorry, I was typing.
Yeah, 3-4. So those in favor? Those opposed? Okay. We come back to the main motion then. Are there other amendments or comments on the main motion?
I would amend the main motion to add the words, at the end to say, payments not to exceed $5,000 in the aggregate.
For a second.
I'll second that.
I'm going to support that. Does anybody else need to talk about it? All right, all those in favor of adding,
At the end, payments not to exceed $5,000 in the aggregate.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, so 6-1 on that. Return to the main motion.
No, that was an amendment.
That was an amendment to the main motion. That was a second amendment to the main motion.
Okay.
So,
I will still vote against the motion. I still think it's unnecessary to have phrased it this way for talking about a project manager for design, bidding, and construction phases of a project which haven't been approved yet.
others? All right. All those in favor of the motion with the amendment, which I'm not going to try and read either right now, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so hand vote on those. In favor? 2. Opposed? Motion fails. Okay.
See you in December.
All right, yes.
That was like an hour for, what, $5,000?
Yeah, exactly. With that, thank you. Chief Deputy Payne sitting down there, so I can understand the feeling. We're another hour and a half in. Do we need another break here? Okay, so please, let's keep it short, but another break, and we'll return to Fire Collective Bargaining Agreement. Thank you.
has it yet. Let me just, I'll do this. I'll make sure you guys get it tomorrow. I'm going to put your name.
Hey, Dan.
Cue video.
I was going to put it on the plotter, but...
Okay, we're back with return to council meeting. Agenda Bill 4758, Fire Collective Bargaining Agreement is next up, and Chris Siegel's going to be our presenter, so welcome.
Thank you. Chris Siegel, HR Director. The proposed contract before you covers a 3-year period of time. In year 1, 2012 is the first year. The contract expired at the end of 2011. So in year 1, the contract provides an overall compensation increase of 3.64%. What makes up the 3.64% is a cost of living adjustment of 2.59%, a market adjustment for firefighters in the amount of 1.5%, a market adjustment for lieutenants in the amount of 2%, and a market adjustment for battalion chiefs in the amount of 1%. Those percentages, that's 3.64%, moves the bargaining unit to the midpoint of the comparable market, which is ultimately required by interest arbitration. In years 2 and 3 of the contract, the wage increase provided is 100% of CPI, CPIW semi-annual index. So whatever the CPI annual index is for the previous year is what the bargaining unit will receive in a cost of living adjustment on January 1st of those years.
Okay. Anything else?
I have a
Entertain questions?
Back to us. Okay. Well,
you're going to talk about the health plan, just that was another part of this, what you did with the health plan in the negotiations?
Yeah, the reason I didn't bring it up is because there's not an economic impact to the moving the unit from the AWC Plan B, the Regions Plan B they were on, to the LEF Health and Welfare Trust Plan, based on some savings we received by moving the LEF 1 prior retirees to that same plan. There's a significant savings that we split with the bargaining unit that covers any additional costs and premiums the city would pay by moving the bargaining unit to a new insurance plan. So I didn't include it since there's not an economic impact. There's savings on the city side versus increases.
Okay, so questions. Mike?
Actually, I'd like to just move to a motion, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind. Maybe, and here's why, is it's my understanding most, if not all, of the discussion with the council has been in executive session. I was not part of those conversations, but I've read through the packet and trust that my fellow council members as well as the staff has done an excellent job of putting this package together. So I'd like to move to authorize the city manager to sign the collective bargaining agreement with the Mercer Island Fire Union Local 1762 for the period of January 1st, 2012 through December 31st, 2014.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I still will entertain questions to Chris if you'd like to ask them, but we can also go to discussion if we're ready for that. Mike?
Great, thank you. So explain to me the market adjustment. Go into more detail, and let me kind of preface this is that this is difficult material to cover about our personnel's wages. It's difficult to cover, but I know no other way than to talk about the hard questions out in public because it's a public entity, and we all as professionals recognize that this is an item that gets discussed out in public. And Councilmember Grady, it is hard to understand these contracts. So you've been through several of them, and they're hard to understand. I spent quite a bit of time going over this one in particular. And so I'm going to ask a few questions, not only for my edification, but also, and this is the one time I'll defer to the cameras, also to the public, because oftentimes the director points out and the city manager points out that a large part of our expenses has to do with personnel expenses, salary and benefits, and they're just eating the city alive, and Councilmember Grouse alluded to it also. And for that reason, we need to supply dialogue to our citizens on why there is such an expense, such a increase in expense. Well,
I had nothing to do with that.
I did not do that.
Although that does make a point.
I did not do that. Director Siegel, explain to me the market adjustment, how that is obtained.
Okay, so I assume you're talking about the 1.5% for firefighters, 2% for lieutenants.
Well, maybe I don't know. How do you? I thought the market adjustment was the midpoint adjustment.
Yeah, that's what the first year market adjustments include both the cost of living adjustment, that 2.59%, and the 2% for lieutenants, 1.5% for firefighters, and 1% for battalion chiefs. What we do when we're in negotiations is we look at a comparable market. And comparable market is defined by assessed valuation and population primarily. And we negotiate who the comparable market is. So the city puts forth jurisdictions and the union puts forth jurisdictions, and ultimately they best abide by arbitration standards which rely upon population and assessed valuation. So
does it change? The comparable markets change?
Yes, they
change. Why would they change?
Based on incorporations, annexations.
They're all fire districts or cities, so it has to be the fire suppression industry. They're in the state of Washington, usually near us, so Puget Sound, central Puget Sound, and they can change depending on changes in those jurisdictions. If they stop looking, feeling, and smelling much like us, then they drop out of our market.
I wouldn't expect there to be a lot of change in those markets. I understand the issue about incorporation, but so let me ask it a different way. So in the years that you've been doing this, have you ever had a situation where the market adjustment was not needed, where we were at midpoint or above midpoint?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know specifically for this bargaining unit, but it's happened several times throughout. I get negotiations all mixed up. I do them pretty much every year.
I'm talking about this bargaining unit.
It very well could be. I know it happened on the police side. I can't say for sure it happened in fire. I assume it probably has happened.
Okay. Another question I have is, now I didn't vote for the 2009 contract because I anticipated, one, the slow economy, and two, I saw that the increase was going to be way out of sync to what the CPI was. So in the briefing, it sounded very much like the increases would be according to CPI and would closely mimic CPI. But if we have the last contract time to go as a basis, the actual increase was 14.5%, 14.56% according to that you supplied to the council, with a CPI change of only 4.43%, giving a real change in real terms of over 10%, in the economy that we had. Now, as far as I can tell, we're basically doing the same thing with this contract that we did last contract. So when I'm here 3 years later and we go over this contract again, when in 2015? Is it 2015?
2014. Well, yes, 2015.
Okay, 2015. Am I going to have the same inflation of salary and salaries that we did during the last contract? Meaning, if we do the same thing, should we expect something differently?
I can't answer that. Every bargaining session I've ever been in is different. And if you look at the 2009 numbers versus the 2012 contract, the 2009 market adjustments were significantly higher. It took us more money to get to the midpoint during that year than it did this year. And so I don't know what would happen in 2015. It's dependent upon the market.
Mike, the biggest picture answer to your question is maybe. If historic trends continue, and Chip has been telling you this every year for many, many years, salary and benefit costs rise about 5% per year. That's not just here, it's throughout the market. Even during the recession, we were finding somewhat close to that, a little bit lower than that. And the big single driver that's pushing it is healthcare costs. It's not always salaries, it's healthcare costs. And we try to say that, and somehow it's not catching on, but it's a major problem. And it's a national problem. It's not one we get to fix here.
Other questions, comments at this point? Okay. I think the overriding message I've gotten from staff has been that these increases are larger than our Timaiman-created ability to raise taxes to keep pace with inflation, and so therefore is perhaps not eating the city alive, as the phrase Mike used. But this is it's a long-term problem. So you're you're right to point out that this is a long-term problem that we face as we try and balance budgets going forward. The problem, though, is that we have a very limited ability to correct our way out of this problem, if I understand correctly, because this is state law that defines what our capabilities to change things are.
Particularly in the public safety realm. The system that we have is guided by state law for public safety employees. It's fairly restrictive. It provides for mandatory binding arbitration if there's an impasse, and the arbitrators are by law required to go through the same comparables process and then review arbitration decisions. And you can almost guarantee that if you've gone through a reasonable bargaining process, accounting for all that data, an arbitrator is going to award, and you don't have a choice, it's not a negotiation, he's going to award that same contract or perhaps worse. So that's what drives you to agreeing. If you don't like that system and you want more flexibility, you don't get to change it. You'd have to go to Olympia and get the legislature to change it. The quid pro quo in having this system the way it is was public safety employees a long time ago bargained with the legislature and gave up the right to strike. And we don't get to change that. So it is what it is. And it's frustrating to me too. There is a system that does build ongoing cost, and it's hard for us to control it, but it is not a system we get to change. And there have been many attempts over the years to try to get the legislature to reform the binding arb law and provide some other means for resolving the disputes. And in the end, the legislature is not inclined to even touch the issue. And you can imagine why, because they are lobbied heavily by the unions. So it is what it is. And I just hate to see you guys sort of beat each other up over this here. This is the best we can do.
Mike?
Mr. Mayor, I suggest we call the question and put in context, we live on a wonderful piece of property. These fine folks protect us, both our homes and our children, and I think to what extent we can expedite a vote tonight would be a good thing.
So this is kind of good because we haven't had a call the question yet, and there actually is a formality around call the question. Maybe, Katie, you can just walk us through it because it's kind of fun to do something a little bit different here. So Mike has said call the question. We do an immediate vote on whether there's a supermajority. No, there's a supermajority required to call the question, right? And so all in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the question is called. So just correct me if I'm going wrong here, but otherwise, so the motion is authorize the city manager to sign the collective bargaining agreement with the Mercer Island Fire Union Local 1762 for the period of January 1, 2012 through December 31, 2014. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we got to do something a little different, and thank you for spicing things up a little bit, Mike. Calling the question is not debatable. Calling the question. Calling the question.
The motion to call the question is debatable.
No, the motion to call the question is immediately voted, and you have to have a supermajority to move forward on it. Katie, look it up for us, please. Okay. Now, Council, we are at Agenda Bill 4756, 2011 Mercer Island Dashboard Report. Chip and I had a quick conversation about this a moment ago. He offered that this could be done quickly. My reaction was, I don't care that it be done quickly. I'd prefer that it be done with some detail, and we thought that moving it to next meeting's study session might be an appropriate place where we could spend more time on it. So and not tired time. So I'm looking for council.
I'm for moving it, Mr. Mayor, but not as a study session.
Okay.
Unless you want to televise it, a study session.
Okay, so there's one piece of input. I'm looking for others. So do I?
I'm happy to move it if that, I mean, because I don't want to really rush through it right now. I mean, I'd like to take some time with it, and I know we still have one more item to go over. So if we have time on the schedule to postpone it, I'm okay with that.
And we actually still have two because we moved the school district agreement, although, did we decide, we decided that was just off?
We're going to have to wait till September, and we're going to...
Okay. So
we're going to answer your question, and we're going to put it on the consent calendar.
Okay. So Agenda Bill 4753 will not be happening later this evening. So
I'm for moving it too, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Others, how about we just do a thumbs up, thumbs down? So thumbs up is in favor of moving it to a study session, which will not be televised unless we change our rules around televising things between now and then. And thumbs down is leave it right where it is and jump into it right now. So
well, another option is to move it to a regular agenda item like we're using now.
Okay.
Or could we reverse things and talk about peak right now, and then talk about the dashboard report?
Right. Now you've just overwhelmed me with the number of options I have to present to
That would let some people go home.
Yeah, you're going to get 2 votes for option.
Which question?
So somebody help me out of this.
I'd like to...
I know where you are
okay.
on this.
All right.
I was looking for some of my silence.
This procedure sounds to me, Mr. Mayor, like you're going to vote for the study session. If the study session fails, then you'll ask to vote for a regular agenda item.
If you want to do that, I won't put it on September 4th because it's already too full.
On regular agenda. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mike, I like that. This is thumbs up, thumbs down on study session on September 4th, and if not that, then we're going to keep it tonight or move it to a much later date. Oh, dear God.
Are we meeting on the 20th? Because if we're not meeting, then it becomes tight. If we are meeting the 20th, it becomes the one and only topic, potentially.
I think by tradition, we have to move the 20th meeting.
You're talking August 20.
September...
August 20.
Well, you're going to be...
No, I was supposed to be off tonight, but I am here.
I believe some number of people, both staff and council, have made plans. We kind of check in to see if the second August meeting is going to happen or not earlier in the summer, and it's fairly rare that we actually have it, but I think there have been some people made plans.
It's just it's still here on the planning schedule.
Yeah.
Which is why it was open in my mind.
Because there hasn't been a motion to formally cancel it.
All right, we will come to that in just a little bit.
Sorry, and my question, are we doing the I-90 tolling data next meet?
We just, sorry, we were having a brief...
I put in the request to the
offline
state, and I have not received a response back yet, so I would suspect we won't have it.
Okay, so let's assume that that is pushed out in time. Okay, all in favor of moving this to a study session on September 4, thumbs up. 2. Okay. All those in favor of not, I guess. Well, I just want to make sure that, so that was thumbs up or thumbs down, right? So thumbs up was...
Why don't you just make a decision? Exercise your mayoral authority and just make a decision on it.
Wait, he's trying to be
But he's not supposed to be. He's a mayor.
All right. You guys didn't have an opinion one way?
I would like to have it in normal session.
Okay. Hannah, what did you want to do? Normal session. Normal session. Tonight or another night?
Another night.
Another night. All right, I see 4 for that. So, Rich, move it out in time. Chip, you're okay with that?
All right, we'll figure it out.
I voted for 2 weeks ago.
All right. Yes. Yes. All right. Watch it, Dan. I'm going to make an abrupt decision on you on one of these things, and it's going to catch you flat-footed.
Well, he did. I called the question about it.
All right, so we now move...
Thank you to the staff for who was sitting here for...
Yeah, thank you. We move to Agenda Bill 4750, Peak Project Agreement Monitoring Status Report. Kirsten, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking around.
Good evening. Kirsten Taylor, DSG Administrative Services Manager and City Ombudsman. Here to do a status update on the peak project agreements. With me tonight to answer any questions that you might have are Bruce Fletcher, the Parks and Rec Director, Meryl Kamashat, Facility Scheduler, Stephanie Davidson, our Boys and Girls Club Director, and we don't have the neighbor here tonight. I think she thought this would go late and declined to come and answer questions.
Amanda's wiser than the rest of us.
She had originally intended to be here.
Watching the Olympics.
Yes. Yeah. She said she was actually going to watch it, though, to listen to any comments, maybe not live, though. So I'm going to assume that you've read the agenda bill and looked at the attachments, so I'm going to do a brief presentation, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions, hear any comments that you might have. So the agreements that we have been looking at are the original development agreement with 2 amendments. There also were a couple corrections to those, and that was between the city and the school district. There's a settlement agreement that is between the school district, the city, the Boys and Girls Club, and the neighbor group. There's the agreement for public contribution between the Boys and Girls Club and the city, and then various permit documents that were issued by the city. I even put together, for the various parties, we have a whole book of agenda bills and agreements that have gone out to the various parties for reference. So the status update, just the high-level status update is that operations at peak are going well. We have received minimal complaints, and a lot of times we know what's happening by the number of complaints. There were a few things to be worked out, complaints received, quickly addressed by either the school district or the Boys and Girls Club, and resolved. The Oversight Committee meets regularly, and the Oversight Committee has representatives from the district, the Boys and Girls Club, and the neighbor group. The city is invited at their wish to come to that meeting. But staff from all the parties are working to monitor and meet the requirements. I would like to point out that I included in the agenda bill a peak agreements table. So we just listed the primary agreements. The first column in that table shows items that were addressed through the permitting processes, so through plan review, inspections, and approval of that project. The second column are just a list of ongoing items that we will need to, I wanted to make sure that we were reminding ourselves of what the ongoing requirements are. And that is on, starting on page 4 of the agenda bill. And I won't go through all of those, of course. And then I had an additional column of things that we just wanted to, again, make sure that we were asking this year, questions we were asking. So if you have any questions on those, as I said, I'm not going to go through all of those, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on those. So I wanted to I went out and took a few pictures of some of the things that I thought were kind of successes in the construction of this project and the early days of the project. So we have the Boys and Girls Club operating at the Peak building. Also, the school district has activities there. The city has activities in this building for a certain amount of hours a week. One of the initial real concerns from the neighborhood and from the city was what would the physical, visual impact of the Peak building be on that neighborhood. So this is a picture. We were able to get the project to preserve some trees. Mature trees make a real difference in the impact of the project. So this is from the neighborhood street looking at the Peak building. This is a viewpoint from the Peak building looking out at the street. There's a combination of preserved and new vegetation that have provided a really nice screen between the building and the neighborhood. We will be monitoring the vegetation for 5 years. The project had to replace some early plantings that died, failed. This was a picture of an area that's not growing very robustly, but we'll give it time before the bond is up, and they'll either need to do additional plantings or this will have grown and taken effect, and then we'll approve it. But we will continue monitoring that. So again, just another view of the effectiveness of the vegetative screening for the neighborhood. Another area that I think got a lot of attention starting early in the project planning was how was traffic going to be monitored and controlled? What were those impacts going to be? And this is just a picture from Amanda Clark's letter of one of the early issues that she had as a pedestrian walking on the sidewalk. This is the exit of going out of the Peak building. And she said that the driveway was really wide, there was no stop sign, and there was no marking on the pavement. So she raised the issue. The Boys and Girls Club was very quick to respond. They talked with our city staff, came up with a very simple but effective plan of putting a stop sign, putting a stop line so that cars would see where to stop, and the arrows, the in and out arrows. There were cars that were coming up side by side to turn two different directions where it was intended to be one in and one out. So again, that was just a really quick success story of issue raised and resolved very quickly. Other issues were what would happen with the parking. The shared parking was a major discussion. So there is parking that is peak parking only, and then there is parking that is shared parking. So there are signs everywhere around this project that really indicate who can park where and when to make sure that the shared parking is shared appropriately. There's no questions on what parking is available during the school day for the school district employees and the Peak Project or Boys and Girls Club after the school hours and into the evening. We also have a lot of no student parking where they weren't exposed to expand into this parking. So the signage, I think, is effective. It directs people. It indicates who can park when and where. So those were just a few quick success stories from the monitoring. So where are we now? The staff is monitoring the agreement requirements. I invited comment letters from the district, the club, and the neighbors because we knew from the lack of complaints, or the few complaints that we did get and resolved very quickly early on the operations of the Boys and Girls Club, I asked for any comment letters, and those are the attachments 2, 3, and 4 in your agenda bills. We can talk a little bit about those or not as you want. The school district, they had some concerns with the transportation demand management plan that they were required to put together for the high school, managing the high school traffic. But they would like some changes. They would like the city and council to understand that doing the reporting takes quite a bit of time and effort that they would prefer to spend otherwise. But they can live with the plan as it exists. From the Boys and Girls Club, Stephanie is here to answer questions you might have. They are having a little bit more of a difficulty with one of the requirements in particular, which is the scheduling of their fall fundraising breakfast. And when the agreements were written, as we discussed in preparation for this agenda bill, the no school day schedule was different for the high school. There were days on Friday mornings where the students weren't at school in the mornings. They either came later in the day or they had more Fridays or days where they weren't at the school, so there were options for them. They had a handful of options. This year, and I think in the past year, they didn't have any non-student days that weren't also holidays. So the original intent of the agreement was one thing, but now the situations have changed. So we need to have those discussions. And we'll go back to the group to talk about if there were any issues. I know last year they amongst the group themselves had these discussions and then came to the city later to say, oh, here's our transportation plan, and so they had agreed amongst themselves that they didn't think that, and that included the neighborhood group, that wouldn't affect the neighborhood. We might not have agreed up front with that, but they were already, it was a couple weeks before the event. So we just asked them to give us very good traffic control plans. They managed the event very well. There were no complaints from anybody in the neighborhood, staff, citizens, neighbors who participated or were in the area indicated that the traffic was handled very, very well and there weren't, undue impacts. So that's just some feedback for you as well. And then there's a letter from Amanda Clark representing the neighbors, addressing a few different things, also encouraging the school district to do some things that are part of their agreement, basically agreeing that there haven't been many issues. The one that she brought up was addressed very quickly, and she appreciates that the Oversight Committee meets regularly. So our next steps are city staff will continue to monitor the agreements, and all of the involved parties will continue to meet on a regular basis. So I guess questions, comments from council?
Thanks, Kirsten. So, questions? My sense here is
So I have some questions.
Okay. I'm going to say first, my sense here is we've got a pretty well-functioning arrangement with folks, and a bunch of minor things, but my sense is none of them rise to the level of really requiring council interaction, but they're things that staff and the folks associated with the different entities will be taken care of on an ongoing basis. So I think that sounds great. But Mike, you want to dig in, so dig in.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Kirsten. That was a good presentation. Just a few questions here. How do we notify neighbors that we were having this?
The city doesn't notify whoever's holding the event is required to notify the neighbors.
No, I mean, how did we, or did we tell the neighbors that we were having this discussion?
Yes, I let Amanda Clark know last spring that we were going to be coming back to council with a status update report. At that time, comments were invited from the group, and I've kept everybody informed about the meeting schedule.
So what you did is you told Amanda and not necessarily all the neighbors in that area.
Well, and she's the signature representative of that neighborhood group.
Okay, that's fine. And TDM, who and why do we do that?
The Transportation Demand Management Plan. There were some leftover parking and transportation issues with the high school that benefited from a plan that the school district hired a consultant to put together to manage the traffic and parking for the high school. That was it was referenced in several of the agreements and also in the SEPA document.
A lot of the energy, source energy for doing that came from the council. We asked them to do it.
Yeah.
So it's a paperwork. Is it a paperwork exercise?
No.
Or is some good coming from it?
It's significant, and it does require
when you say
them.
It's significant, I'm sure it's significant to put together, but does any good come from the energy to put it together?
I'm not talking about the report. I'm talking about the activities that the school district is asked to do to manage the traffic, because which I hear you.
No, I'm just going to get you off the hook.
Thank
It's
you.
not Kristen's job to give an evaluation of its value. I mean, that's really up to the council.
Yeah, and maybe I can speak to that a little bit, because, we really pushed on that, because traffic was the number one concern in terms of the unmitigated impacts once everything was fully constructed. And it was a significant concern of the neighbors. And quite frankly, the school district really hadn't done much on transportation demand-side management, and they have a lot yet to do. Because during the discussions, we were talking about, okay, how many shared parking spaces do you have? Or, do you give out permits for carpooling to school, for instance? Nothing. So they've got a long ways to go. And the reason it's important is because you get a lot of the spillover from the school, particularly the high school, over into the peak area. So there's a significant concern, particularly for preschoolers, that trying to drop kids off early in the morning, and that parking space would be taken up by the high schoolers. So we did a lot to push them, and we continue to ask that they do more. Thank you.
The 1 million quid pro quo, there was a calculation to determine how we would get that million from gym usage. So have you cranked the numbers and said, and determined how much of that $1 million we've gotten in usage versus how much we anticipated?
I get to ask Parks and Recreation Director Bruce Fletcher to comment on the actual usage, because if I'm recalling the agreement correctly, the city is given 6 hours a week of programming time in the Peak building. That was part of the agreement. There was a list of 10 value items that the city would receive for that $1 million. I think one of the number items is that we would get a certain amount of usage from Boys and Girls Club facilities, which...
For the record, Bruce Fletcher, Director of Parks and Recreation. I don't know, we haven't been calculating up to $1 million. Hopefully it will become many $1 million over the years. But we have 6 hours per week, around 300 hours a year, and it started out slow, and I know the Parks and Rec Subcommittee, I think Dan was the one that talked, and so we really got to bump those up. So we've been programming in there. We have the Little Champs that we meet regularly, not during the summer. The big Nate Robinson basketball camp has been moved from the community center to Peak, and I called Stephanie, and she was just great, so let's do it, even though it's 200 kids every day there. And then we're also looking at some others. So we're probably using, right now we're probably closer to 5 hours a week. We got another hour to go for programming, but we'll get there. And it's nice to know we have it available. Plus, anytime that I needed to use something, I'd call Stephanie, and we're real easy. The working relationship is great. My staff and her staff get along really well, as well as the school district, too.
I've got a question now. I'm just looking for any opportunity I have to get objective information. I key in on it. So this was an opportunity for objective information, i.e., when we first did this, there was a calculation for the 1 million quid pro quo. So what I was looking for is that we were expected to have received this much in value, i.e., time times whatever it is.
I can come back to you with the hours used, what the rental would cost, and what our value would be at a later time. I can't do that right now.
But just to be clear, we never codified a particular formula or calculation. All the law requires is that there is definable public benefit, and in those discussions and negotiations, it was that we would have public access to the Boys and Girls Club some amount, and then the two departments, the club and the Parks Department, got together and identified what they thought was a reasonable sort of partnering that would work. But I don't know that you could ever trace back to the number of hours they said that they could do times the value of that space times 20 years equals $1 million. I don't think you'll ever get there. So that because I don't think we ever really did it that way. We tried to estimate, is this public benefit? We kind of looked at it and said, yep, I think that meets the test of the law.
Thank you. So there was the programs that were displaced from the community center. They were displaced because there's other activities backfilling at the community center?
Well, then Jana, she was able to rent space that we normally would have classes on, so it kind of works out for us as well. And to have that extra space really is needed. We appreciate it.
Okay. Mike, take a pause because Mike, Mike's got a question.
I just wanted to point out another benefit that I was surprised I didn't have a picture of, and you have an electric charging station in the front of your facility, and it is used frequently, I note, because I'm there frequently coaching. Well, no, I would be using it if I could, but I'm there frequently coaching kids. But I do note that it's taken in quite a bit of usage, so that's very proud.
I did have a picture, but I needed to get my slideshow down to a reasonable amount of slides.
All right. Okay. Back to you, Mike Zero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the one last question I recall with the whole arrangement is the Boys and Girls Club renovation. Any status on that? Right.
I don't have.
And that's an agreement actually between Michael O'Brien and the Boys and Girls Club, and it's not an agreement that we monitor. That's for them.
Yeah, I think it is something that we could monitor because it was sold to the public. It wasn't just the Peak building, it was the whole concept.
It was sold, I know what you're saying, so I'm not trying to be argumentative, but it actually was sold to a private organization. It's an explanation and an agreement with two private individuals, and it would be a bit awkward for government to step into that private relationship and monitor it.
Agreed.
And I note that this is outside the topic that we had on the agenda as well.
I don't understand why that is, but okay.
That it?
Thanks.
Okay, no motion. Oh, Jane.
Question. Sure. Well, given the background of this project with the various entities, it's really heartening here several years later to see how things are working, there were problems that are fixed, and that on an island where we have common constituencies but different missions, a school district, a city, and a Boys and Girls Club can work well together, also with the neighbors. I think it's the way it ought to happen. But I wanted to hear more about the difficulties with the class scheduling program, because that seems to have such potential for a community calendar of some kind where, one place you can find out what's going on. Many different places.
Yeah, Merrill has done a great job of setting up the class system for everyone to use. I know the Boys and Girls Club enters their significant events into that, and significant means there's a definition by the amount of traffic. I think that there's some I'm trying to think of the nice way to say this. There's just some training issues with the school district about, and technology issues with using it. So they are working there
14 years of training issues with the school
They are working, they assure us that they are working their issues, and I think Merrill makes up the difference. So Merrill, if you would like
Merrill is our, in Parks and Rec, and is our scheduler.
Yes, I'm Merrill Thomas, I'm the facility scheduler. And yeah, the bulk of the class issues were kind of up front in training and then just setting up the database, both for the high school and for Peak. Also, our IT departments have to work together, so if something goes wonky with class at the high school, our people have to go out there. So there's just a little bit of the setup stuff. But I think it's actually working exactly like it's supposed to in terms of being able to monitor big events, being able to schedule around things like that. You know, if I have a rental request for a big football tryout, I can look at the stadium, I can look at the entire high school facility and know, oh, there's a science fair with 500 people already coming, so that's out of the question, and then we can kind of move around that. Same with the Peak. So that coupled with, I mean, we talk almost every day. It actually is working as it's supposed to, just a little slow in getting everybody on board, and if there are staff changes and that kind of thing, we go through the training again, but it works pretty well. And I think another part we can work towards is a more, like you said, a universal calendar is coming up with a good report. Right now, class can pull really good reports, but
they have to be kind of customized. So I think that's something we can maybe look towards, but the information is always there.
Well, would there ever be, maybe, Katie, I'm getting off the subject here, but would there ever be any potential for individuals to go online and look at a master schedule of what's going on all over the island? You know, that kind of thing.
Potentially. We've shied away a little bit on that, at least with our fields. Fields is the bulk of what I do, and there's always this worry about some rogue group from Seattle that could view our schedules online, see that a field's open every Tuesday, and just tend to show up and take it over and not. So it's kind of why we've gone a different route. Yeah, it does happen, but we've skirted that a little bit by having a website that our main Ballfield users, the Ballfield user groups, they can access. So it is online. They can check it if there's a field question about who's supposed to be where. So we feel like we've kind of given the transparency to the people who need to know without advertising it too much. So there still is a little bit of a balancing act to figuring out how to do that, but potentially it could happen.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, Dan? You look like you're debating whether you should weigh in. You know, you really don't have to.
You know, the class, cute. There's no question to call. The class software thing just triggered something that's just in bad memory. This has been this is literally ever since I've been the council, going back now to 1999, I think.
I've had this conversation with every superintendent.
Right, and it's almost beyond the point of being comical that we cannot get the school district to participate in class at the level that we had expected them to do, which was to allow people to actually book space in the school building.
One retirement away, and that's not far off.
It's sad. I mean, but it's unfortunate, because I mean, this is something that we all recognize for well over 10 years should be done, and it hasn't been done, and it's not the fault of the Boys and Girls Club. The school district doesn't come to the party. But regarding the agenda item, Chris and I very much, like Mike, appreciate the thoroughness of the report, and I'm very encouraged to see that the peace reigns on 86 these days, and the neighbors and the Peak and the school district have managed to resolve their issues. This was a matter that I think those of us who were on the council back then recall the fight that happened, and that I was glad to see that we were able to come up with a settlement agreement that brought everyone together. So it's very reassuring to know this has actually worked out the way that those of us who worked on it contemplated it would work out.
Okay. Kristen, thank you. Stephanie, you didn't have to say anything, but thank you. Bruce, Mel, thanks. You can step up to the mic and say hello if you want. Okay, we conclude.
Oh, no, statements. I was just... first of all, I think it's a great process that we have here, that we're coming full circle around to evaluate a project that we had expectations for, and we're evaluating the expectations now based upon what the agreements were. So I really like that process, and I appreciate that we're doing this. I would recommend, it seems to me I read someplace in there where they wanted to suspend the neighborhood meetings or change the neighborhood meeting. I live right next to the beach club, and we have a regular proactive meeting with the beach club, the neighbors do, and inevitably there's a, hey, what about this, or what about that? And I would like to see that continue, the proactive meetings with the neighbors. I think that's very good. You know, I'm very, very pleased that I have not heard any issues, and I was keyed in with the folks who weren't real excited with Peak, and I have not heard anything from them. So that's really great news for the community. But from an evaluation perspective of the council going forward, I think there are some, as we look back 2020 to improve processes going forward, we've got to be tight on those agreements or arrangements, and not everything was fulfilled. I'm not real comfortable yet with the $1 million quid pro quo that we're getting the full use out of the gym, whether there's even the demand for the gym, and I still have a little bit of an issue with the Boys and Girls Club. So going forward, we kind of need to evaluate how we can, future agreements can be tighter so that we get the full use that I think our citizens thought we were going to get. I was just real pleased that Amanda Clark wrote that letter, and there's no issues there. That's really good news, I think.
Okay. Anyone else? Mike?
Just quickly, I coach many a team at the Boys and Girls Club, as do many of your friends and colleagues, and it's just a fantastic facility. And I appreciate all the work you guys have done to keep it that way, and it is always full. And I know there may be a question about, is the city using it enough? It's like, it's always busy. and I'm glad that we put the stop sign there, because that's been problematic. But I do have to say, it's just a great group of folks that work down there, and I always enjoy coaching almost 10 months out of the year, because you just get to interact with really good folks at the facility, and the amount of kids that we pump through that organization and turn out to be just really well-rounded individuals is something that we should be very proud of. So thank you.
So Stephanie is here, and I think I'm questioning how, has she made the request for the change in the hours, or are we going to talk about that process?
My recommendation is that we let the Oversight Committee deal with that, and if it doesn't appear to be an issue with the changed circumstances, that we continue to monitor that event very carefully, and if it's not problematic, that we don't raise it to a higher level. I think that just lost my
with reference to that,
Yeah.
I would just be very conscientious, overly conscientious about the agreement that we made with the neighbors. And I question whether, if you're going to make a major move like that, whether just talking, I don't know how keyed in Amanda is with all of her neighbors.
But I don't...
Be careful.
It's not clear to me that staff has the authority to amend that agreement.
Well, that's true, too.
It's a council-approved agreement, so if you're going to be proposing an amendment, at least to the settlement agreement, which I'm intimately familiar with, that you need, I think I would strongly suggest you need to come back to council. That's my opinion.
So I feel like we've got something that's working pretty well, and council ought to leave well enough alone with this and let the folks who are all engaged in the issue try and negotiate solutions that work for them. But
that's fine, but it's just, I don't disagree with that, but ultimately, if you're going to amend the settlement agreement, it's a council-approved agreement, and the amendment should be council-approved as well.
And is the settlement agreement the agreement that would have to be amended in order to address the question that's being raised here?
Why don't we, because Councilmember Grouse is correct, if there is a significant change to that, that would have to occur and have the council approve it. But why don't we go back, take a look at look at the issue and see if that's something that does rise to the level or it does have to come back to council.
I would just say, as a we have a responsibility to the neighbors, and I'm sure some can be worked out. I'm very positive about, but we still have a responsibility to the neighbors, for good notification, go through the process if we're going to amend that thing. We don't want to bruise that neighborhood.
And I would like to point out that the Boys and Girls Club does a good job of notifying the neighborhood of like the significant events, so that they were notified of that event, and there really was ample opportunity for them to be aware of the event happening, of any issues with the event, and our experience is that if folks have issues, we hear about them. So.
It's the only thing I'll ask is if this does look like it needs to come back to council, give some thought to coming back to us in a form that, rather than addressing the individual points, revises the agreement so that things can be handled without them all coming back to council.
Yes.
So that we don't find ourselves in this position repeatedly.
Yes.
So. Okay.
It's kind of,
looks like she's got to say something.
well, it's somewhat off topic, but I imagine if you communicating with the neighbors about schedule changes, that they're discussing Wednesday versus Monday early release, and so that neighbors are aware of that too. I know that's more probably a school district issue, but that will be, it might be an effect for the neighborhood. So, just raising that.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we're really done this time. Okay. Thank you all. And with that, we come to the end of regular business because we have moved both the dashboard into another night and the interlocal agreement into another night. So, other business. Councilmember absences. There are none tonight. And are there any upcoming that we should be aware of and are not yet? Jane?
I will be absent for September 17th.
We need to talk about the 17th.
Yeah, let's come to that here in just a moment. So hold that thought. Let's Jane, we've got you down for that.
Thank you.
We may change all that. Other upcoming absences. Okay, planning schedule, and Dan, you want to tee up?
Well, no, just September 17th happens to conflict with the Jewish high holidays, which historically, when we've had that conflict, we've rescheduled the September meeting.
Yeah, we usually just go to Monday before or after, and I haven't looked at how the holidays all work out, so.
Either would work, I think.
Well, and it raised for me the question of whether it's either or both, because we had talked about adding an additional meeting in that time frame.
Well, right now, I don't need it to get the work done, but I also am not sure that you'll get through the planning commissioner's recommendations and the town center stuff in 2 readings, in which case we will have a problem. Because if you look at October, November, December, it's just consumed by budget. I mean, you just be spending a lot of time there. It's hard to have too many additional meaty items. So,
can we do a meeting on the 10th?
On when?
September 10th?
So maybe let me propose this. So why don't we pencil in September 10 and September 24, and then not use the 24 if you feel like you don't need it.
Okay, and
do it the other way around.
Well, yeah, if
I know whether we don't need the 10th.
Yeah, but we'd know it September 4th, presumably.
so we would have 3 meetings in September, potentially.
4, 10, 24, and Mike's suggesting the 10 gets dropped if one gets dropped.
Oh, okay. So hold, and the first priority is 24.
First priority is 4, because that's already...
Well, that's already there, but...
Second is 24.
Okay. We'll do that. I'll try and work with Ally so that agenda preparation is as simple as it can possibly be. So it won't be lots of items. It'll be 1 or 2 meaty items that maybe the agenda bill's already been written and you're carrying it on. That's what gets hard when we do add meetings in a month. It's just the cycle of cranking stuff out. She's looking at me like,
you got 2 agenda.
How can we do this?
You got 2 agenda bills that are already there.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Just tell us if it doesn't work, and we won't do it.
No,
it works. It's just a lot. I mean, as soon as you finish a meeting, you've got to start the next one. It's just a lot to have them that close together. But
What it does is it shifts us into a mode where we're doing most of our support to the council, and the basic work, the day-to-day work, gets put on hold.
The other concern is that we're trying to also produce the actual budget document in those 3 weeks.
Right, that's the other.
And so that's a lot of actual extra work that we're doing, and so...
I'm offering it only because I recall hearing that we thought there was a need for another meeting. I have no reason to go there if you guys think it's a bad idea.
Well, let's just hold them for now. Everybody get them on your calendars, and we can answer that on September 4th of what will happen on the 10th and 24th.
Okay.
But
hang
on to them.
And if what you find is you're really better off with another meeting in October, just say so and we'll sort it out then.
Yeah, we got 3 in October already.
Okay. Okay, but so assume we're on for September 4, September 24.
And hold the 10th.
September 4, September 24, and hold the 10th. And the 17th is off.
Great.
Okay? Board appointments.
Hold on.
Sorry?
Sorry, I need you to cancel the August meeting.
Ah, yes.
Gonna do that.
I move that we cancel the August 20th City Council meeting.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that is done. Rich, anything else on planning schedule that you want to talk about right now?
Nope.
Board appointments, we have none. Council member reports. Mr. Ciro.
No report except an invitation for tomorrow night's reception to celebrate the space art pieces. They are called Orbits and Pieces, and this was a result of a poll of people during summer celebration to name the Apollo spacecraft sculpture. The reception's tomorrow from 4:30 to 6 at the community center, and 2 members of the Cox family will be there, so you're invited.
Good. Jan?
Do you have any information, Rich, on what the school board did at the Thursday meeting?
I know Gary did call and tell me what happened with regard to the homestead, the 3 acres or whatever that is. The architect reviewed it and concluded that it would not work to build 2 schools with just that much property. And then the board needs, I think the way he said it, the board or the architect said that if it was the entire property, that would be a different story, and they left it there. I think that's how it happened.
Okay. Donna?
Looking forward to tomorrow night being National Neighborhood Night Out, and looking forward to going to a number of the neighborhoods. So that should be great. And then I just also wanted to point out that Mercer Island seems to be in good company. There was an article in the Seattle Times about the city of Seattle that they were also convening a bike pedestrian car committee because there were many issues with even with bike lanes and things like that, that there were that they need to get this group together, and the recommendations came out were kind of very similar to the ones that we have, the proclamation that we read about everyone being respectful of the roadway and multiple use. So I thought that was very interesting. So if people are interested in that, they might want to check out that article in the Seattle Times. So I thought that was very interesting. And then unfortunate to note that we had that bike accident on Mercer Island a couple of weeks ago, and that hopefully we're continuing to look at those busy intersections. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that it's great to have a historian on the council, because I know that I'm learning a lot, and I think it gives us a lot of good context. So thank you, Jane.
And she writes rap.
Yes. Debbie?
We had a planning commission meeting last Wednesday, so Rich was there in attendance as well. You will be seeing, you do see on your agenda that current plan is to bring to council their findings on the no net loss as well as the 4060. We've discussed a few points or a few of the resolutions to date, including the recommendation that no net loss be eliminated. As far as the 4060, they are expanding or recommending the expansion of the use within 60%. I'm not going to go into detail and steal the punchline there. They're also going to be recommending removing parking from that discussion as well. So that's from the Planning Commission. I don't know, Rich, if you want to add.
Yeah, the process steps that will follow is they still need to have one more meeting where they will take a staff-drafted sort of synopsis of their decision and some discussion of the major points of why they arrived at where they are. That needs to get drafted up, and then they need to review it, tweak it, and then, as a commission, agree that that is the official communication of their recommendations. There was what in effect is a majority and a minority opinion, because it was a split vote on their final decision on the 60/40. So we'll try and capture the flavor of what the two discussions were. In talking to the commission that night, I told them I thought it'd be very important for the council to hear sort of the nature of the discussions that the commission had among themselves and also had with those that testified. They had quite a bit of testimony from property owners, retailers, lawyers representing property owners. I mean, it came from all sides. It was diverse, and a lot of important, sort of meaningful things were said, and I think you would benefit from hearing what was said. You may not land in the same place the commission did, but it's clearly one of those issues that don't decide it snap judgment, because the more you get into the depth of it, the more interesting it gets, and it's a tougher call than it looks. In the end, I was pretty impressed with the commission did do its work. As I say, I'm not sure they come down the same place the council does, and you may change some of this, but I do think that they did their work.
Yeah, I would agree. They put in a lot of hours, heard a lot of testimony, a lot of challenging each other, but even occasionally challenging themselves in terms of some of the positions they may have taken at one point during the debate. So I think it will be a good meeting on the 15th of August, and I'm sure it will be an interesting discussion when it comes to council.
And right now, it's scheduled on the planning calendar for 2 council meetings. That's why I say I'm not sure you're going to be able to do it in 2. The commission couldn't, so we'll see.
It was a summer's worth of effort. Yeah. The other 2 points was, it's unfortunate Bruce isn't here. I've been in a couple parks. I've seen the tobacco-free signs. They're, as far as signs are concerned, they're nice signs. Also, personally, from somebody who lives right in the heart of Seafair on Mercer Island on First Hill, great job from the police department and other public safety entities in terms of keeping things reasonable, and I'll just leave it at reasonable, because sometimes it's not. So great work. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And then final question, Rich. I've gotten several questions, and even have myself, regarding the boxes that were run into in an unfortunate auto accident in downtown Mercer Island. I think it raised questions in a lot of people's minds about whether or not those boxes should be there. Are they sufficiently safe? It took out a number of people's power. It took out traffic lights. And, of course, most importantly, somebody was in very serious physical jeopardy. So maybe if you could just spend a couple minutes describing what those boxes are and the extent to which the city can or cannot influence their future.
Sure. Those 2 boxes are cabinets that house high-voltage electrical lines serving the Mercer private property itself. They also power, to some degree, our street lights, not traffic lights, but street lights. And then I imagine there's other things that are being powered by them. But there's pretty heavy-duty power going in there. Those 2 boxes have been exactly in that location for as long as I can remember. They're the only things that were original to that site prior to its redevelopment. Everything else in that site changed. Those 2 boxes were always there. They are on private property, and PSC uses them under an easement granted by the property owner. The questions come up many times, couldn't the city have required those boxes to be somehow dealt with, undergrounded or otherwise, as part of the redevelopment? And I'm not even sure I really know the answer to the question, because we literally got 2 different legal opinions from the same attorney during that redevelopment process. And the reason it seems to be somewhat ambiguous is it was a permit or an application for development, which when people do development, we get to permit it and say yes or no to things, but those 2 things weren't moving. They weren't being requested to change. And it was on private property, and we don't own it. But so I'm not really sure where you'd come out, but in the end, the property owner decided to keep them where they are. I've had conversations with the property owner and with PSC and urged them to take a look at it, that it was clearly a safety issue in that accident, and we wouldn't want to relive that. I guess the way I characterize those conversations is both PSC and the property owner have indicated an openness to try and do something about it. Neither one has said, I'll go do something. There's an openness, but so far nobody's said they're going to take action. And so I can't tell you what this is going to turn out.
Will she have a feel for the amount of money to move them?
Yeah, the last time it was costed out, it was in the 400-plus range, and the city had offered to provide up to $150,000 to help incentivize the movement. PSE had some dollars set aside that they would have spent because they had some modifications they wanted to do to those lines down in the ground, but PSE would never put a top limit on this project's going to cost X and we'll hold all the players harmless for any dollar amount above that. They wouldn't do that. So the property owner didn't feel that was enough assurance, so he was understandably reluctant to just dive in. So it didn't happen. PSE has since done those little modifications in those lines anyway. So now they say it's hard for us to argue that we should be spending money on those boxes.
So I'm feeling like we're starting to get astray because that wasn't a topic on the agenda. So if there's more to that council would like, maybe we bring it back in a more formal fashion.
I'd like to see that brought back to council.
Okay, I don't know what else we would do other than what I just said. So we can. Give me an idea how you would want to deal with this, because if the council gives us direction, I don't know if I would come back with recommendations for you on what to do.
Well, I definitely, as you know, I've had email exchanges with you on this as well, and it's a significant public safety issue, significant. And we were very fortunate that no one was killed during that.
So we have two council members who would like it to come back.
We'll have it come back, and we'll put some thought to what kinds of communications that city council can make on behalf of the city on city letterhead. And also to the property owner and the PSA.
Okay. Very good. Gabby, anything else for you?
I think I've done my duty.
You've done enough damage. Mike, how about you?
Duty enough.
She covered my negative one, so way to go. Thank you. Just a thanks to the Navy compatriots. They had a great show, and more importantly, and piggybacking on your comment, both chiefs did a great job, and I only know that because I have college-age kids that are out on the water, and they came back, and they were very appreciative of the presence of the Mercer Island Corps out there during some not so reasonable activities. So thank you very much.
I'm sure they were very appreciative, Mike.
Ed, would you mind just giving us a quick seafarer report?
Not at all. Ed Holmes, your police chief for the record. So we had a total of 66 boating under the influence arrests, and if you ever get a chance to go down there, you'll see a true example of not just interagency cooperation, but it's cooperation with other local police departments, state and federal, with the Coast Guard there, State Patrol there, and then our units there with Fish and Wildlife. They have resources there, and then partnering with King County and Seattle Harbor. It is a sight to behold, but it does take that kind of a group effort and a lot of coordination to do that type of enforcement. It's an extremely busy time, as you all, I'm sure, are well aware of that. So, yeah, our guys, it was very hot all weekend, and they put a lot of long hours in, but, yeah, 66 BUI totals, no fatalities related to the Seafair event, so we're counting our blessings with that, and I think our efforts are paying off over the long run.
How was parking on the Mercers?
One email.
Yeah.
I never ride my bike during that week. There's a lot of cars parked down there. Birthday parties.
Thank you, Chief. And pass our thanks along to the staff for having done a good job with it. I did a ride along last year on boat on Seafair weekend, and it was quite an eye-opener to see just how much activity there is out there that's running afoul of what the rules are. So, yeah. So thank you for that. And my only other point is to echo Tana's comment. National Night Out is a great thing. If you're not signed up to go along, please consider it. It's a great opportunity to go out and meet some citizens who are having a nice time having a barbecue. You get to have a nice dinner about 3 times because you get to go to 3 different parties, and it's fun to see people in that circumstance rather than when they're angry about something. So it's well worth doing if you have a chance. I think meeting here at City Hall at 6 or something, or is it 5? Yeah, let's make sure we get that right. But yeah. Okay. With that, I believe we are concluded. So thanks. Kendall, Tom, thanks for sticking around to the bitter end here, and staff, likewise. So we're adjourned.